Perfect. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Interfaith Zoom Passover Seder. Very excited that you're here, and I hope that that we'll have a few more folks showing up. I know that a few people just aren't in the room yet. I'm gonna start with some background information that I think will help to set the tone and context for our evening. So here we go. Oh, yes, excellent. So first, this PowerPoint presentation that I've created is our Haggadah that we're engaging with this evening. But I brought a show and tell, my Haggadot. I buy a new one every year, so I have several different ones. They're constantly coming out with new ones. Each one has a different commentary. Each one has a different approach. Each one is produced by different folks. Anyway, I wanted to show you my stack of Haggadot. The Haggadah is the book that contains the words that we say and the rituals that we perform at the Seder. There are tons of different Haggadot, and every year more are published and more come out. And that's because every year the way that we tell the story changes a little. The word Haggadah comes from the Hebrew word Nun Gimel Daled. For those of you who have studied a little Hebrew, you'll appreciate the etymology of this word, like Reverend Bowerman, who told me that she studied Hebrew. And the word means to declare or to tell, to announce, to report, to make known, to expound, to publish, to proclaim, or to confess. I think a good translation of the word Haggadah would be the telling. So the reason why the Haggadah is called the Haggadah is based on this verse from Exodus 13, which we're going to come back to probably 15 times over the course of this evening. This is the most important verse in the Torah with respect to the mitzvah, the command, the sacred obligation to tell the story of the Passover every year. And the verse says, "You shall tell your child on that very day, it is because of this that God did for me when I went out from Egypt." And the first word, you shall tell, vihigadata, comes from that same root, to tell or to announce. So the section of the Seder during which we tell most of the story is called the Mageed, which also comes from that same root as Haggadah and vihigadata. And this is the crucial point that I'm trying to make about all the different types of Haggadot and the different, like why there are so many different versions of the Haggadah. It's because more than being the story of the Exodus from Egypt, the Haggadah is the story of how we tell the story of the Exodus from Egypt. All right, so we now have an opportunity for discussion. And so we'll do this sort of, if you're with somebody at your room, you can discuss who the main character of the Haggadah is, the hero of the Haggadah, who is the main character of the telling. I've given some answers, but these do not have to be the exhaustive list. I'm going to pause and wait while you discuss. And if you are by yourself, feel free to post in our chat an answer to this question, and then people can also respond to the chat. So so if you are sitting at your computer, feel free to share. And if you're at a table, have a conversation. I will pause. Oh, it says, who is the main character of the telling? The hero of the Haggadah? Moses, God, the Israelites, Elijah, Miriam, Rabban Gamliel, and the sages of blessed memory, one little goat, or you? Okay, Miriam, you have raised your hand. Do you want to unmute and say something?
It's you.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Miriam thinks the answer is you. Good. Does anyone else have a thought they'd like to share?
It's all about you telling the story.
All right, I see some folks have voted for Moses. All right, Randy says that God controls the narrative, but Moses is the protagonist. All right. Nobody for the one little goat?
I laughed at that one.
Well, all right. Jackie says Moses isn't mentioned in the Haggadah, which is true. So Moses might be the protagonist of the Exodus story. That is the story of the Exodus from Egypt. I completely agree with Randy about that. But in terms of our telling of it at the Haggadah, you would think that if you were telling the story of the Exodus from Egypt, you would pretty much have to mention Moses, right? But our Haggadah does not, in fact, mention Moses. Is anyone surprised about that? Show of hands. Yeah, it is pretty surprising, I would say. It is clearly an intentional choice. Hi, Ellie. Hi, Jonah. It's nice of you to join us. Yeah. All right.
Do you want to say hi?
Hi.
Hi. All right, I'm gonna close this poll. All right.
Rafi, question.
Yeah.
So are you saying Moses is never a character in the Haggadah or just not this one?
Oh no, Moses is not mentioned in the text of the Haggadah, the traditional Haggadah.
Ever, okay.
Yeah,
That's what I'm saying.
there is one place where a verse that mentions Moses is quoted, but the whole verse isn't quoted. Just part of the verse, and the part that has Moses in it is the not quoted part of the verse. But in fact, there's like a deliberate editorial choice to not include Moses in this in the Haggadah's telling of the story. All right, we're gonna keep on going. All right. Yes. Wait. Hang on. Yep. Good. So the theme of our Seder tonight is going to be the historical development of the Seder, right? That is to say, how has the Seder changed over time? Or I wrote it very nicely in this letter. I wrote, how is our Seder different from all other Seders of previous generations? Right? How is our Seder different? So David Stern wrote probably more than any other classical Jewish text. And I love the idea of calling the Haggadah classical Jewish text, because of course it is. It is perhaps the most important Jewish book other than the Torah. That is to say, or the most well-known, the most regularly read book. Right? People, lot of Jews read the Haggadah every year. So probably more than any other classical Jewish text, the Haggadah lends itself to historical commentary. Like most things in Judaism, the roots of the Seder go back to the Bible, specifically to the account in the book of Exodus, chapters 12 and 13, of the Passover sacrifice that was offered and eaten on the night before the Israelites left Egypt. The Passover Seder, as we know it, however, actually originated in late antiquity in Roman Palestine in the first centuries of the Common Era. That historical context is very important because both the very structure and format of the Seder derive from the Greco-Roman banquet and its specific conventions. All right, so I just want to tell you, I did a really deep dive into the history and development of the Seder. These are my three primary source materials: the Polychrome Historical Haggadah, which is really, it's an out of print. It is a really terrific, amazing book, which every section of the Haggadah is color coded by when it was written and when it was added into the Seder. So that's cool. And then also the Schechter Haggadah, which is actually a very big Haggadah and therefore is at the bottom of my stack of Haggadot that I showed you before. So I'm not going to pull it out. And the JPS commentary Haggadah. So these are three Haggadot which really have a specific focus on history. There's going to be a quiz at the end, okay, about these different periods throughout Jewish history. This is how Jewish scholars divide up the historical time periods. I'm not going to spend a lot of time making sure that everybody knows exactly what I'm talking about, what year I'm talking about, but you can always ask me, okay? Just interrupt and say, Rabbi, like, what is the Gaonic period again? So you don't have to memorize this, but just so that you should know, the way that we divide it out is there's the biblical era, which is like Moses, King David, Isaiah, Jeremiah, all the way through like Nehemiah, and that's sort of the end of the biblical period. And then there's like the biblical period sort of takes us to the construction of the Second Temple. And then there's like sort of a Second Temple period that extends past the biblical period, but is sort of included in the biblical period because it is the time that the Bible was codified and written down. And then we get to the Tannaitic period, which is the period in which the rabbis that are mentioned in the Mishnah were living. And that is the late Second Temple period through about 225 CE. And when I say the late Second Temple period, I mean basically the first 2 centuries of the Common Era. Then there's the Amoraic period, which is the period of time that the Talmud was written. Talmud is a commentary on the Mishnah. Then the Talmud is finished basically around 650, and we move on to a period where there were great sages called Geonim, who were the leaders of the Jewish people, and the Gaonic period goes till about 1100, and then the Middle Ages and the modern times, and then contemporary times. All right, and we're going to have stuff that comes from each section, each time period. All right, so now you know the various time periods. All right, so let's now look at our Seder plate. So I have a Seder plate. Folks who got some food with us may have a Seder plate. And you also can look at the picture in the Haggadah. So what do we have on our Seder plate? We have parsley, and the parsley represents the tunic that the brothers dipped in the blood. Anybody ever heard that interpretation before? So I did a deep dive.
never.
Yeah,
No.
I did a deep dive, and in fact, right, so parsley also, everybody says the parsley represents springtime. Like, sure, of course it represents springtime, but it also, the dipping itself represents this sort of, like, what was it that caused the Jewish people to go down to Egypt at all? What caused the descent into Egypt? Was this family strife between the brothers, right? That the brothers like dipped the coat of Joseph into blood and lied to their father and said, yeah, like the Joseph is dead, when in fact they sold him down to slavery. So the dipping like reminds us of that. And the dipping, so that's the beginning of the story. At the end of the story, right before the Exodus, there's another dipping into blood, which is the dipping of the hyssop into blood to mark the doorposts so that God would pass over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt. So both of those dippings, the dipping at the beginning of the story and the dipping at the end of the story, are recalled by the dippings that we do in our Seder. All right, and we are going to dip the green vegetable into salt water, which represents tears, and we're going to dip the chazeret, the bitter lettuce, into the charoset, the sweet apple and cinnamon mixture, which represents the mortar. All right, so we also have horseradish root, which is because you're supposed to have two different types of bitter herbs. So we have bitter horseradish and we have bitter lettuce. Then we have, I already mentioned the charoset. We have the zroa, which is the bone, which is symbolic of the Passover offering and also symbolic of God's outstretched arm. You can see here a picture of a beet, red beet carved into the Passover sacrifice. That is that's what I grew up with, because we had a dairy Seder and we don't mix meat and milk. So we didn't have a meat bone. So instead we had a beet, and my father would carve the beet into an animal shape so that you could really see that it represented the Passover sacrifice. And then we have the egg, which symbolizes the festival offering, but it also symbolizes renewal, the circle of life, etc. And then we have some matzah. The matzah should be displayed next to your Seder plate. You should have 3 matzahs, okay? Because we're going to end up using the different layers of the matzahs at different times in the Seder. So as you can see, I have a plate here with 3 matzahs on it. So you should make sure to have 3 matzahs, a top, a middle, and a bottom matzah. And the matzah, we're going to talk more about what it symbolizes. All right, then you should have some grape juice, which symbolizes joy. And you should have a cup representing Miriam, and it should be filled with water. So if you can find a cup and fill it with water, then you'll have a Miriam's cup. It could just be any cup, but here is a picture of a very nicely designed Miriam's cup. All right, so we have that. And we should have an Elijah's cup. That, again, can just be any cup, and it should be empty and in the center of your table. Elijah, so some customs have you fill the Elijah's cup right at the beginning of the Seder, but it's my custom that we fill it later. So have an empty cup displayed in the center. All right. So, and Elijah, of course, represents the hope for a future redemption. We're going to talk about that more. All right. Oof, there's so much pre-material that I put in this. I shouldn't have put in so much, but whatever. I got excited about all the history. So here you go. We have very little information about how the Passover offering was celebrated until the end of the Second Temple period, some years before the destruction of the temple and the cessation of the temple-centered Paschal sacrifice. The Torah tells us this, and thus you are to eat it, your hips girded, your sandals on your feet, and your sticks in your hand. And you are to eat it in trepidation. It is a Passover meal. There are communities of folks, especially the Samaritans, who still eat the Passover offering with sandals on your feet and sticks in your hand. But most of us, contemporary Jews understand that this instruction only applied to the first Passover and not to other Passovers, meaning not today, but only once in Egypt. But there are some people who still do this, in fact, eating it with sandals on your feet. All right. The Torah does not tell us anything about how the Passover meal should be eaten in like today. No ceremony is connected with it in the biblical text. The Torah does tell us that the Passover sacrifice should be used as an educational tool, which is very helpful for what we're doing here tonight. For example, and it will be when your children say to you, what does this service mean to you? Then say, it is the Passover meal, the sacrificial meal of Passover to Adonai, to God, who passed over the houses of the children of Israel in Egypt, when he dealt the blow to the Egyptians, and our houses he rescued, right? God here is like that is the answer that you're supposed to give to your children when they ask, why are we doing this? And also here again, Exodus 13:8, I said at the beginning, we're probably going to hit it 15 times. So here's another time. And you are to tell your child on that day, saying, it is because of what Adonai did for me when I went out from Egypt. All right. Can I call on someone to read? Mishka.
Okay. The term Seder Pesach once meant the order of the Passover sacrifice in the temple. But after the temple's destruction in 70 CE, the rabbis remodeled the Seder after the Greco-Roman symposium, sim meaning together, posium, drinking wine. At these Hellenistic banquets, guests would recline on divans, while servants poured them wine, washed their hands, and served appetizers and dips before the meal. The guests would then take part in a philosophical debate, after which the meal was served. An ancient how-to manual for conducting such a symposium says, a symposium is a communion of serious and mirthful entertainment, discourse, and actions. It leads to deeper insight into those points that were debated at table, for the remembrance of those pleasures which arise from meat and drink and is short-lived. But the subjects of philosophical queries and discussions remain always fresh after they have been imparted. Plutarch.
All right. Somebody else want to read? Let's see. Jackie.
Somehow I knew that was coming. Thus, the rabbis prescribed such a banquet for Passover: much wine, 4 cups, appetizers, karpas, reclining on pillows, having our hands ceremonially washed by others, a royal feast, and most importantly, a philosophical discussion on the story of the Exodus and the issues of freedom versus slavery. The rabbis wanted Pesach to be an experience of freedom and affluence. Thus, they chose to borrow the dining habits of their aristocratic contemporaries. However, there is a fundamental difference. The Greco-Roman feast was for the rich only. It exploited slaves. It restricted asking questions and exchanging opinions to the ruling class, men only. But at the Pesach Seder, all people, including even the youngest children, are invited to eat like royalty, to ask questions, and to express opinions. Alongside the wine of the rich, there is the bread of poverty. The needy must be invited to share our meal. Stylish banquets may easily turn corrupt, but the Seder encourages us to savor our liberty without exploiting or excluding others.
Yeah, I think it's really important to begin your Seder by thinking about the importance of justice as a primary response to slavery. You should be right. You should be kind to the stranger because you were strangers in the land of Egypt. And so, right, yes, like it's designed to be like a classical Greek symposium, but with a big difference. All right, I want to say something about asking questions. At this Seder, and hopefully every Seder you ever go to, all participants are invited, encouraged, requested, implored to ask questions or to offer opinions at any time by means of typing them into the Zoom chat feature. And I'm happy to read them and I will respond to them. Seder is meant to be interactive and participatory. The goal is to feel a sense of liberation and gratitude. And in Judaism, we do that by engaging in study, in prayer, and in song, which is what the Seder is. We are asked to disagree, since disagreements for the right reasons can actually reflect the Infinite One more fully than having one thought. So whether it's your first Seder or one of many hundreds, ask questions. All right. Now, the word Seder means order, and order is central to the Jewish concept of freedom. Now, we're going to sing oh no. Luckily, I have extra matzahs. Oh. My matzahs all fell and broke. They have to be unbroken.
No.
Luckily, I have extra ones. All right. While I open this up, we're going to sing the steps of the Seder. We're going to sing it through in Hebrew with the English transliteration here on the right. And then we're going to sing it with the English words, which is the left-hand column. We're going to keep coming back to this, the order of the Seder. So you'll be able to, you'll get a sense of it as we go. Kadesh Orchatz, Karpas Yachatz, Mageed Rochza, Motzi Matzah, Maror Koreh, Uchano, Tafun Barech, Alel Nirza, Day Kiddush over the grape, and taste how sweet was our escape. Dip hands, then greens we dip, and into the matzah rip. Take the cover, put half inside, and the other half now hide. Tell the tale of slavery's woe, and how God let our people go. Give hands, praise God for bread. With freedom's matzah we are fed. To eat the bitter herb we strain, that we might taste brick maker's pain. Hillel said, mix herbs again with matzah's promise. Pain will end. Tale continues as we dine. Who will the hidden matzah find? Thank God for all our food. And now with praise this feast conclude. So, this very nice little comment by Jonathan Sachs. And note that these 15 steps were introduced into the Haggadah in the Middle Ages. That is, the steps occurred before, but the idea of calling them this and like marking as you went through the steps, that was a Middle Ages thing. Okay. So now we'll sing to the first step. Kadesh. All right. All right, so at this point, I'm going to ask everybody to pour the first cup of grape juice or wine. It's customary to not pour for yourself, but to pour for somebody else at your table so that each person can feel like they are free. Each person is poured for. Of course, if you're the only one at your table, like I am, you should pour for yourself. Grape juice. All right. The framework of the 4 cups of wine at Seder is drawn from our earliest texts that describe something akin to what we do on Passover today, the 10th chapter of the Mishnah Psachim. How early is this? Basically, we know it's the early 3rd century, but we don't know how much earlier it is. But as I mentioned to a couple of people over the course of this week, the rabbis of the Talmud had a vested interest in us thinking that this was a very ancient practice. So they lied about how early it was. So like our earliest texts about this claim that it was in fact earlier than it was. So the Mishnah says they mix him the first cup. And when it says mix him, they mean actually mix the wine with water, because in the ancient world, people watered down their wine, like everybody did basically. All right, so they mix him the first cup. Beit Shammai say he blesses over the day and then he blesses over the wine. And Beit Hillel says he blesses over the wine and then he blesses over the day. They mix him a second cup, and this is where the son asks the father. They mix him a third cup and he blesses over the meal, a fourth cup, and he concludes the Hallel and recites over it the blessing over the song. And so here is a historical note. Hillel and Shammai were active at the time that Jesus was alive, right? The decades before the destruction of the temple. In fact, there are ways in which people have shown that the debates between Hillel and Shammai are actually weighed in on by Jesus in the New Testament. There are passages that seem clearly to be responding to debates of Hillel and Shammai, who were contemporaries of Jesus. Because of that, we know that the disagreement is evidence of the antiquity of this section of the Mishnah. All right, so the first cup, which sanctifies the holiday, is the text that we recite at the beginning of every festival, very similar to the Kiddush that we do on Friday night. One of the explanations for why we have 4 cups is because there's this verses from Exodus chapter 6. I will bring you out from beneath the burdens of Egypt. I will rescue you from servitude to them, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm, with great acts of judgment, and I will take you for me as a people, and I will be for you as a God. So I'm going to ask everybody to read with me the reflection. Raise up your cup and read the reflection with me. I am ready to fulfill the commandment of drinking the first of the 4 cups. This recalls God's promise of redemption to the children of Israel. As it says, I will bring you out beneath the burdens of Egypt. All right, so this is the full text of the Kiddush for the first night of Passover. I am not going to read it in Hebrew, the full text, because it is not, in fact, the first night of Passover, and it would be weird to sanctify April 7th as the first night when it is, in fact, not. But what I will do is recite the blessing over wine, which you can say anytime you drink wine, and it's the first line here. So, and there's a special tune for the festival, which I will use. Baruch Adonai melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. And I am going to do this, the final blessing here, which is the blessing for allowing us to reach this day, because while it is not Passover, it is a very special day of us joining together in interfaith community, celebrate Passover together. And so that's the very bottom here. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, for giving us life, for sustaining us, and for enabling us to reach this moment. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shechianu v'kiyamanu v'gianu lazman hazeh. And we should drink the wine while reclining. All right, let's sing to the second step. Kadesh, or cups. All right, so we've gotten to the second step, which is the first hand washing. You can wash your hands with any water. I've prepared for myself here a cup of water and a bowl. Now, note that the structure of the Seder is very clear, right? The Seder begins with the wine and then washing hands and then the matzah and then the vegetable. And then after we tell the story of Exodus, we do wine, the second cup, and then washing and then matzah and then the vegetable. So it's like we have two beginnings, which I don't know if you've ever noticed that before. I had never noticed that before. I learned that while I was doing the research for this in this very Seder. And like there's a feeling, I think it's supposed to give you a feeling of intensification. Anyway, so we wash our hands. They don't have to be washed like, you know, with soap for cleanliness. This is a ritual washing. So you just, my custom is to wash every hand with a washed hand. In other words, right over left, then your left hand is washed, left over right, then your right hand has been washed by a washed hand, and then right over left, now your left hand has been washed by a washed hand. So it's 3 pours, and every hand is washed by a washed hand. Kadesh Orchatz Karpas. All right. So everybody should take some parsley. Pass the parsley around the table. And you should dip the parsley in some salt water. Now, here's a historical note, since the whole point of this Seder is the historical development of the Seder. I'll say that originally the lettuce was used for both the karpas and the maror, and was dipped twice. Like first it was dipped in the salt water, and then it was dipped in the haroset. But over time, it was strange through the same action twice, but only have it count to fulfill the mitzvah the second time. That was weird. So then people said, okay, it has to be something that isn't the maror vegetable. So we use parsley, but different folks around the world use different vegetables, even a potato, celery. At the Seder I grew up at, we did all of our vegetables at this point. So we dipped asparagus into garlic aioli, and we dipped artichokes into pesto. And we just had like a lot of different vegetables and dipping. And the idea was to eat a lot of vegetables, because then you wouldn't be hungry as you went through the Seder, and you could take a little longer to tell the story. So we have a blessing on eating vegetables. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who creates the fruit of the earth. Anyway, historically, right, this is just an appetizer. This is salad with vinegar, like salad dressing. Like eventually the vinegar got changed into salt water, and then eventually the salt water was given the symbolism of being like tears. But originally, this was just your hors d'oeuvres. So welcome to the hors d'oeuvres step. Kadesh Orchatz Karpas Yachatz. All right, we're up to the 4th step, breaking the middle matzah. All right, so everybody should take the middle matzah, not the top or the bottom one, but the middle one, and break it. Now, when you break the matzah, you never break it exactly in 2 equal pieces. So you should take the bigger piece, and the bigger piece is representative of the future bigger redemption. That is the messianic redemption. And you take that piece, wrap it up in a cloth, and hide it for later. And the small piece leave here on the plate. And there's this really beautiful interpretation about the matzah that I am going to skip in the interest of time, but I hope you read it while I was talking. Kadesh Orchatz Karpas Yachatz Mageed. All right, so we begin our Passover story by opening the door. And when I say opening the door, I mean opening the door to your house. So I'm going to open the door to my office. Okay. Barbie, can you read for us?
Open the door and recite together. This is the bread of poverty and persecution that our ancestors ate in the land of Egypt. Let all who are hungry come and eat. Let all who are in need come and share the Pesach meal. This year we are still here. Next year, may we be in the land of Israel. This year we are still slaves. Next year, may we be free.
Nice. All right. It's now time to pour the second cup of wine. Don't drink it yet, but do pour it. And at this time, the youngest folks present offer the 4 questions. So let's see. I see, is there somebody from the Tibbetts family who would like to read these questions?
This is Josh. He will be reading the question.
Excellent. Go for it.
I don't know what to read. Down here, not the Jewish, but right here.
Yeah, you
What
don't have
makes
to read
this night different from all other nights? Do I read?
Yeah.
Yeah, keep going.
On all nights we eat bread or matzah, but this night only matzah. On all nights we eat other grains, but on this night a bitter vegetable. On all nights we do not dip even once, but on this night we dip twice. On other nights we drink sitting or leaning, but on this night we all lean.
All right. Thank you so much, Josh. So this is the traditional text of the Haggadah. These are the questions. But you might be curious to know, have these questions always been the questions? And since this is about the historical development, so this is singable English, which is really cool, but less relevant to this Seder. So skipping it. All right. So how many questions are there in the Manish Chana that we just did? Barbie says 4. Looks like Josh says 4. Everybody agree on 4? Oh, Tim, you said 5.
I thought there was actually 5 also.
Mishka says 5. Randy says 5.
5, yes.
Randy, can you tell me what are the 5?
What are the 5? Okay. Without it in front of me, you're making me do this? There we go. Well, it's the first one that people seem to forget. What makes this night different from all other nights?
Great. All right, good. So 5. We have makes this night different from all our nights, and then we have 4. All right. So another way to say this might be, it's actually just one question. What makes this night different from all other nights? And here are 4 examples of differences. Okay, so one question, 4 examples. All right. Then I have a lot of questions here that would be very interesting questions that I hope you take home to your Seders and think about. Like, how can we all recline but also serve food? Is everyone at the Seder reclining? Or are there some people who are a little less reclining? Like, we're all free, but some people are a little less free than others, you know, like the women, for example, which often is the case in many Seders where like somebody is cooking and serving all of this food to everybody. In my house growing up, my mother was a rabbi and my father was the cook. So it was my father, but he like spent a lot of time during the Seder, like cooking and preparing the meal. and bringing it out. He was not always there for the whole time. All right, what about the neighbors that we left behind in Egypt, the ones visited by the angel of death? How can we live with their tears? How can each one of us actually work for the freedom of others? Haven't we done this before just last year? What will we see differently this time? All right, great. So lots of questions. And here's a reminder that at this Seder, everyone should ask questions all the time, at any time. Interrupt me, post to the chat, ask a question. It's supposed to be interactive. I want to hear everybody's questions. All right. So the idea that the ritual telling of the Exodus begins with question can be found in the Mishnah that we talked about earlier. They mix him a second cup, and here the son asks his father. And if the son lacks the intelligence to ask, his father instructs him, oh, here are some questions you might ask. How is this night different from all other nights? Here's the matzah. Okay. To me, the most obvious question is, why are we pouring a second cup? So if anybody grows up in a Jewish house, right, all of the festivals begin with a cup of wine. The idea that you would pour one cup of wine and then like pick up the matzah and break it and not eat it, right? And then pour another cup of wine. The obvious question is, why are we pouring more wine? Like ritual wine. We just did Kiddush. Okay. The Mishnah directs the Seder's discourse to begin with a question from the child. If the child does not ask a question of their own, then the parent prompts the child to ask by reciting the Manishana, which are statements meant to elicit questions. The notion that a question should open the Seder is likely a reflection of the Greco-Roman custom of beginning the symposium's discussion with a question. And in fact, symposiums often began with questions about food. It was like an entry point into deep philosophical discussions were questions about food. So our questions, which a lot have to do with food and how we're eating the food, are very much connected to this idea of questions. Of symposium. So the fact that a child should ask is directly connected to all the times the Torah says that children are going to ask about this holiday. All right, now here's some more history about the Manishana. The Mishnah's version has 3 questions, not 4. On all other nights, we dip once, but on this night, we dip twice. On all other nights, we eat chametz or matzah, but on this night, only matzah. That one is the same. On all other nights, we eat roasted, stewed, or boiled meat, but on this night, we only eat roasted meat. Right? So that question has been completely left off of our questions. We begin the telling, the Haggadah, with questions about the special foods. And note that we're going to end the Mageed with Rabban Gamliel's explanations of these foods. And the original version of this question of these statements has one question that relates to each of the special Passover foods, maror, matzah, and Pesach, the Passover offering. So it was like 3 questions at the beginning, 3 statements at the end. It like really balanced out really beautifully. But our version has 4 questions, and like our question about why do we recline makes no sense in an ancient Greco-Roman context where everybody knew why we were reclining. It's because everybody reclined when they had symposiums, right? But we don't know that, so instead we have to make up an explanation for why reclining is spiritually meaningful. All right, we're going to continue. Jill, can you read for us?
Blessed is the omnipresent one, Baruch Hu. Blessed is the one who gives Torah to the people of Israel, Baruch Hu. The Torah alludes to the 4 children, one wise or thoughtful, one wicked or rebellious, one simple or innocent, and one who does not know how to ask.
All right, and here are some pictures of them. Just curiosity, does anybody have an opinion about which of each of the 4 children are depicted in this depiction? The 4 options are wise, wicked, simple, and doesn't know how to ask. Peter. I thought I saw you having an opinion. Whoops. I
Oh,
accidentally
me?
backward. Yeah, you.
You asked the question, which one is depicted in this picture?
Yeah, which one is which?
Which one?
Oh, which one is which? Well, it looks to me like the closed, I would guess that the closed book doesn't know how to ask the question. The wise one would be the one in the one with the open book with the text. But I would guess that the wicked one is the one that's on fire. And simplicity, I would guess at the blank page.
Nice. Does anybody have a different interpretation?
No.
All right, I'll give one. I think the wise child is on fire with interest and intellect, burning curiosity. The wicked child has the book closed. I'm not even interested in this. The simple child has the text, but no fire. And the child who does not know how to ask is the blank page.
I like that.
All right. Oh, nice, Kathy. Nice. All right. Terrific. I think that this depiction lends itself to discussion and interpretation, which is cool. All right, which is part of the point of this whole thing. Okay. Here's the 4 daughters. I think the wicked child here is depicted as more of a rebellious child, less wicked, more rebellious. Here's a depiction where each of us has all 4 in us. And we're going to sing the Ballad of the 4 Children to the tune of Clementine. Sing along with me. Said the parents to their children, at the Seder you will dine, you will eat your fill of matzah, you will drink 4 cups of wine. Now these parents had 4 children, yes, their kids they numbered 4. One was wise and one was wicked, one was simple and a bore. And the 4th, so sweet and winsome, was so young and also small. While the others asked the questions, this one could not speak at all. Said the wise one to the parents, would you please explain the laws and the customs of the Seder? Would you please explain the cause? And the parents proudly answered, as our forebears ate the Paschal lamb ere midnight, and from slavery were freed. So we follow their example, and ere midnight was complete, all the Seder could not after 12 remain to eat. And did sneer the child so wicked, what does all this mean to you? And the parents' voice were bitter as their grief and anger grew. If yourself you don't consider as a child of Israel, then for you this has no meaning, you could be a slave as well. Then the simple child said softly, what is this? Quietly, the good parents, their offspring, we were free from slavery. And the youngest child was silent and could not speak at all, but with eyes all bright with wonder, listen to the lessons all. So dear people, heed the lesson and remember evermore what the parents told their children, told their kids, numbered 4. I hope you like the very egalitarian version of this song. The original one, of course, had 4 sons, not 4 children, but figured, why should the children all be men? Yeah, okay. All right. Since we're doing the historical development, I'm just going to very briefly show you this, which is that the 4 children are also developed over time. In the Mechilta de Rabbi Ishmael, there are the wise child, the wicked child, the stupid child, and the one who does not know how to ask. That became the simple child later, right? Our version is like a more heavily edited, in other words, a later version of this text. So interestingly, like how this came about is that the Torah mentions 4 times, when your children ask, you shall say to them. That's why it begins with the Torah alludes to four children. The Torah says 4 times, you shall tell your children, or you respond to your children about the Passover, and so then the rabbis like interpreted each of those moments as coming from a different kind of personality type. Anyway, so interestingly, you can go through and compare all of these and watch the historical development over time. We're not going to do that. All right. We're moving on. Would somebody raise their hand and would like to read this? Okay. Unmute yourself and start.
Whoever you are.
Malina Nazir, do you want to do that? Oh yeah, okay. Somebody from the Tippett family, excellent. Perfect.
The Mishnah states as a general rule that in telling the story of Exodus, we must begin with the same shame and end with praise. A Jewish story begins in sadness and ends in joy. What specifically does this mean on Pesach? The Talmud.
Stop there for a sec. So basically, Thomas got 2 ideas about this. One rabbi says, we're supposed to say we were slaves to Egypt and God freed us. And the other rabbi says, originally our ancestors worshipped idols, but God taught us about monotheism. Okay, so it's 2 different understandings of what it means to have been enslaved in the past, right? Is the story of the Exodus about physical slavery, or is it about spiritual slavery? Are we thanking God for freeing us from physical bondage, or are we thanking God for embracing us and freeing us from our previous idolatrous practice? Maimonides also says there's the story that's the educational story that we tell the children, and then there's also the adult story. So the Seder operates at multiple levels, right? There's the physical level and the spiritual level. It takes an adult to understand the journey from polytheism to monotheism, from myth to faith. That kind of a beautiful phrase. All right. So we're going to do both. Our Haggadah contains both answers, both Shmuel and Rav. All right. So you were reading. I don't know your name. You're not Josh. Yeah, you.
Oh, hi, I'm Madison.
Madison?
Yeah.
And your brother?
My nephew.
Your
Josh.
nephew? Oh, that is Josh. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Matt, do you want to read Madison?
Sure. Do you want me to read this one? We were slaves?
Yeah.
Okay. We were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, and Adonai, our God, took us out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. If God had not taken our ancestors out of Egypt, then even we, our children, and our children's children would still be slaves in Egypt. Now, even if all of us were scholars, even if all of us were sages, even if all of us were elders, even if all of us were learned in the Torah, it would still be our duty to tell the story of the Exodus from Egypt. Moreover, whoever elaborates upon the story of the Exodus deserves praise.
All right. Does anyone have any questions or comments or thoughts? Reactions? All right, so this is the first answer. We were slaves and now we're free, and we've got to tell about it, even if we already think we know. Even if we already think we know. Now let's tell a story about some rabbis who you might think that they already knew, but they instead expounded and expounded. A tale is told about Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Tarfon. They were gathered in Bnei Brak, discussing the exodus from Egypt all through the night, until their students came to them and said, "Rabbis, the time has come to recite the morning Shema," meaning it's morning already. You did it all night. Good for you. So in other words, this previous page said, whoever elaborates on the story of the Exodus deserves praise. And we immediately get a story of rabbis who elaborated on the story of Exodus. This is part of what I was getting to when I suggested that the rabbis were the heroes of the Seder, right? Because clearly the Haggadah values that the rabbis are discussing the Exodus all night. Like, we should all be like them. Okay. I'm going to skip this one. All right, now we're up to the second answer. Who wants to read this? Mindy.
You caught her off guard. Am I reading?
Yeah, you're reading.
In the beginning, our ancestors were idol worshippers, but now God has brought us near to serve Adonai. As it is written, Joshua said to the people, "Thus said Adonai, the God of Israel, long ago your ancestors, including Terah, the father of Abraham and Nahor, lived beyond the Euphrates and worshipped other gods. But I took your father Abraham from beyond the Euphrates and led him to the whole land of Canaan and multiplied his offspring. I gave him Isaac, and to Isaac I gave Jacob and Esau, and then Jacob and his children went down to Egypt."
Nice. Keep reading.
Blessed is the one who keeps the promise to Israel. The Holy One calculated the end of our exile and acted just as promised to Abraham, our father, at the covenant between the Pisces. Pisces. Pieces.
It didn't say pieces. It's a typo.
God said to Abraham, "You should know that your seed will be strangers in a land not their own. The people of that land will enslave and afflict them for 400 years. But that nation whom they serve, I will judge. Afterward, your seed will go out with great wealth."
All right. So now we raise the cup together and recite with me. This promise has stood us and our parents in good stead. For not only has one enemy stood over us to annihilate us, but in every generation, enemies have stood over us to annihilate us. Yet the Holy One keeps the promise to save us from their hands. And we put the cup down. Any questions or thoughts?
Question, did we
Yeah.
drink from the cup or just put it down?
Just put it down. No drinking yet. Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead. Unmute. You have to unmute. Ask to unmute.
My
This
question is there mention of Ishmael at all in your readings?
In the Haggadah, there is not a mention of Ishmael specifically, but definitely in other parts of our story.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Edith.
This is a section of the Haggadah that brings me to tears every year. I am the child of Holocaust refugees. And I know that in every generation, there have been people who have tried to kill us just because of our religion. It's a very meaningful part of the Haggadah.
Yeah. Does anyone have a response to Edith?
Just to confirm what she said.
Mishka agrees.
A
I guess,
comment
yeah,
from-
Peter.
Yeah, a comment from having had to reflect on, not on Haggadah specifically, but on the same sort of direction. It's been really crucial in the 20th and 21st century for people who claim liberation theology, including Native American folks in upstate New York, to have this collective sense of identity. And so going forth, the Haudenosaunee writer John Mohawk talks about how the Haudenosaunee are still here, even though the British and the Dutch colonizers no longer are. And it's something that doesn't make sense logically if you come from the majority culture, but I think it does make that sense of identity as a people being what survives is crucial, and it's been so crucial to so many peoples who've been oppressed.
Yeah, I was gonna say I appreciate that comment because I think, right, it is part of the story of the Jewish people that in every generation there has been a threat to annihilation, but it is true of many peoples that there is a consistent threat to annihilation, and sometimes it's because of a pull towards majoritarianism, pull towards that we should get rid of differences, and antipathy toward the other, and sometimes it's like more specific, like a targeted, systematic attack on a particular nation. Yeah, thank you.
My name is Maliha. The only thing that stands out to me is that we as people of faith, all of us think that, God is there to protect us. And I think we all feel that in some form or the other, this world is a very cruel place right now. So I'm sure all of them are thinking the same way, that please God protect us. And when they are saved, it's like, it's because of God, because this is our faith. So this is just, it's like a common thread between all the religions. That's just stood out to me.
Thank you, Maliha.
I also wonder if the enemy stands over us to annihilate us may not always be physical, but could be spiritual, or to ignore us as women or as gay people or trans people or whatever, to just ignore that we're even the poor, to ignore that we're even there at all.
Yeah, I absolutely think that willful ignoring is a form of cultural annihilation or social annihilation. Yeah, nice. All right, we make the Seder. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Well, all this brings to mind of whatever is happening in the world today, and I think we all need to pay attention to it. Right now, there is a lot of problems going on in India against the Muslims. They've been asked to leave or prove their identity where they lived for generations on end, and in China. So it's going on around us still, and we're not able to learn from this story. And I think it's so important for me to be here and to hear the story so that I can internalize it, and also to bring to attention that despite all of that, it's still happening. And when we do these interfaith things, it just brings us closer and brings our stories together. And we need in our regular lives, bring it out to the public and know this is still happening, and then we need to still protect each other.
Amen.
Amen. And and one more thing that stands out to me is the common humanity that is running through it. There was a book of political science that I had read. I don't really know the author. And it said that humans can be worse than animals. And I think this is exactly what's happening in the world right now.
Yeah. Yeah. humans behave with intentionality, and that intentionality can be particularly terrible.
Exactly.
So we make the story of the Exodus our own by always relating our own lives to this story. If the goal of the Seder was simply to tell the story of Exodus, then we would just open up the book of Exodus to chapter 12 and read it, right? We would read selections from the Exodus. Some modern Haggadot do that, but the traditional Haggadah, in fact, is based on the Mishnah says, then they expound from the Arami Oved Avi until he completes the whole the passage. So instead of reading from the book of Exodus, we read 4 verses from the book of Deuteronomy, and then we engage in an explanation of each phrase. So why do we do this from Deuteronomy? It's because these 4 verses are the briefest and yet still comprehensive passage in the Torah, which tells the story of the descent into Egypt and the redemption. Such a short passage is prime material for Midrash, which is a literary genre, a unique Jewish literary genre, which focuses on individual words and phrases and connects them intertextually to other portions of the Torah. It's sort of like hyperlinks before there were hyperlinks. I mean, 2,000 years before there were hyperlinks. Now, historical note, how old is this Midrash? Some scholars thought that because these 4 verses are contained in the liturgy of the holiday of Shavuot in the temple, that every pilgrim would have known them, that these 4 verses were like just everybody knew them by heart in the ancient world. And therefore, it makes sense that when you were telling the story, you would start with a text that everybody knew, because it was an oral culture. So memorized text is like a very important sort of starting point. But it turns out that there's sufficient evidence that while there may have been earlier versions that people did know, the version that we have of this text and Midrash is fairly late. I mean, maybe even 9th century. So here are the 4 verses. Edith, do you want to read the 4 verses?
An Aramaean sought to destroy my father, and he went down to Egypt and sojourned there, few in number, and there he became a nation, great, mighty, and populous. And the Egyptians dealt harshly with us and afflicted us and imposed heavy labor upon us. And we cried to the Lord, God of our ancestors, and the Lord heard our voice and saw our affliction, our strain, and our oppression. And the Lord brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand and with an outstretched arm, with great terror and with signs and wonders.
Great. Now we're going to take each verse and then each phrase from each verse. So go and learn what Lavan the Aramean tried to do to our father Jacob. For Pharaoh decreed only against the males, but Lavan tried to destroy everything. As it is said, an Aramean sought to destroy my father, and he went down to Egypt and sojourned there, few in number, and there he became a nation, great, mighty, and populous. What do you think Lavan tried to destroy everything means? This goes back to our whole question of, is it the physical slavery or the spiritual slavery? Lavan tried to convert Jacob and his descendants to idolatry. And so that would have destroyed the Jewish people right from the beginning. The Seder says, the Passover Haggadah says, maybe that's even worse than what Pharaoh did, which was to kill all the Jewish men. Right? Killing the Jewish men meant that Judaism still survived through the women. But trying to convert the first Jewish family to idolatry would have destroyed everything before it even got a chance to start. All right, we keep going. Who wants to read next? Carly? No? Okay, Randy? Did you already read? Okay. Bob.
Okay.
He went down to Egypt.
He went down to Egypt, compelled by the divine word. Was it not his?
Yeah.
Oh,
sorry.
was it not his choice? Could he have made a different choice?
Yeah. Keep going.
And sojourned there. This teaches that he did not go down to settle permanently in Egypt, but only to live there temporarily, as it is said. And they said to Pharaoh, "We have come to sojourn in the land, for there is no pasture for our servants, your servants' flocks. For the famine is severe in the land of Canaan. For now, though, let your servants dwell in the land of Goshen."
All right. So I have a comment here about work visa versus green card. Very interesting, but we're not going to talk about it right now. But for another Seder, think about it. All right. Bob, keep reading.
Few in number, as it is said, with 70 souls did your ancestors come down to Egypt, and now the Lord your God has made you as numerous as the stars of the sky.
Keep going.
There he became a nation, great. This teaches that the Israelites became easily identifiable there. They became unique, recognized as a distinctive nation through their observance of mitzvot. They were never suspected of promiscuity or of slander. They did not change their names. They did not change their language.
All right. Go to mighty and populous.
Mighty and populous, as it is said, and the children of Israel were fruitful and increased greatly. They multiplied and became exceedingly mighty, and the land was full of them.
Keep going.
Okay. And the Egyptians dealt harshly with us and afflicted us and imposed heavy labor upon us. Continue?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, just this whole slide.
The Egyptians dealt harshly with us, as it is said, "Come, let us deal with them wisely, lest they should multiply, and if it should come to pass that a war should occur, they too may join our enemies and fight against us and go up out of the land." That's that divided loyalties thing. "And afflicted us, as it is said, they set the taskmasters over them in order to afflict them with their burdens. And the people of Israel built storage cities, Pitom and Ramses, and imposed heavy labor upon us, as it is said, and the Egyptians enslaved the people of Israel with rigor."
Great. So remember I said we didn't just open the book of Exodus and read it? Well, we don't, but you'll notice that all of these, many of these proof texts come from the book of Exodus. So we get a lot of Exodus in, but we don't just read from the book of Exodus. We only get it in as it is coming to explicate or deepen our understanding of the verses from Deuteronomy. "And we cried out to the Lord, the God of our ancestors, and the Lord heard our voice and saw our affliction, our strain, and our oppression. We cried out to the Lord, as it says in Exodus chapter 2, and it came to pass in the course of those many days that the king of Egypt died, and the children of Israel groaned because of their labor and cried, and their cry of bondage came up to God. God of our ancestors, because of the merit of our ancestors were we redeemed from Egypt. As it is said, and God heard their groaning, and God remembered the covenant from with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." All right. I'm skipping "the Lord heard our voice" and going to "and saw our affliction." And saw our affliction. This refers to the enforced separation of husbands and wives. The Egyptians decreed that men should sleep in the field and women should sleep in the city in order to decrease their offspring. The women, however, would bring warm food to their husbands and comfort them. Thus, in spite of the decree, they would be together, and they did have children. Through the merit of the righteous women of that generation were the Israelites redeemed from Egypt. All right. Skipping to the last verse, verse 8. "And the Lord brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand and with an outstretched arm, with great terror and with signs and wonders. The Lord brought us out of Egypt, not by the hands of an angel, not by the hands of a messenger, but the Holy Blessed One alone. as it is said, I will pass through the land of Egypt, and I will strike down every firstborn in Egypt, both human and beast. I will execute judgment on all of the gods of Egypt. I am Adonai. All right. With a mighty hand and with an outstretched arm. When the Egyptians made the lives of our ancestors bitter, the Holy One said, I will free you from the burdens of the Egyptians, and I will deliver you from their bondage. I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and through extraordinary judgments. I will take you to be my people, and I will be your God. And you shall know that I, Adonai, am your God. With great terror, this is the revelation of the Shekhinah, the divine presence. And with signs, this is the staff, as it says, and this staff take in your hand with which you shall do the signs and wonders. This is the blood, as it says in Yoel, I will show wonders in the sky and on earth, blood and fire and pillars of smoke. And another explanation, with a mighty hand is 2, with an outstretched arm is 2, and with great terror is 2, and with signs are 2, and with wonders. So you'll see that in each case, there are, is counting the ands as a separate one. So like and then the thing is 2. Okay, so this is 10. These are the 10 plagues which the Holy Blessed One brought down upon the Egyptians in Egypt. And now we take the second cup, which we still haven't drink, and it's traditional to dip out wine or grape juice from the cup onto our plate to symbolize the fact that our joy cannot be full, because we know that there were some people who had to suffer in order for us to be free. And indeed, today also, sometimes in order for there to be freedom, some people have to suffer. And so we dip out from our cup of joy. So dip out with me. Blood.
Blood.
Frogs.
Frogs.
Lice.
Lice.
Wild animals.
Animals.
Cattle disease.
Cattle disease.
Boils.
Bills.
Hail. Locusts.
Locusts.
Darkness.
Darkness.
And death of the firstborn. And then Rabbi Judah would give them a mnemonic based on the first letter of each plague. Titzach, Adash, Be'achav. What does this teach us? I really have no idea. I really don't know why you would make a mnemonic for the names of the 10 plagues in Hebrew. Like, it's just as easy to remember the names of the plagues as it is to remember the mnemonic. It's very strange. Okay, but nonetheless, it is in our Haggadah. All right, we now raise Miriam's cup, which is filled with clear water, and we read together. This is the cup of Miriam, the cup of living waters, which helps us remember the Exodus from Egypt. These are the living waters, God's gift to Miriam, which gave new life to Israel as they struggled with nationhood in the wilderness. Miriam lived among her people in the desert, following the path of chesed, or loving kindness. She constantly comforted the Israelites throughout their long journey, encouraging them when they lost faith. Miriam's cup is a symbol of hope and renewal. You abound in blessings, God, creator of the universe, who sustains us with living water. May we, like the children of Israel leaving Egypt, be guarded and nurtured and kept alive in the wilderness. And may you give us wisdom to understand that the journey itself holds the promise of redemption. Now we can sing this song about Miriam. Miriam ha-neviah, Oz v'zimra beyada, Miriam tirkod itanu, lehagdil zimrat olam. Miriam tirkod itanu, letaken et haolam. Bimera v'yameinu, hitevienu, El mei ha-Yeshua, El Mei HaYeshua. All right. Okay. So we're up to Dayenu. Dayenu is a hymn which has as its theme, if God had only taken us out of Egypt but had not punished the oppressors, it would have been enough. If God had punished the oppressors but not humiliated their gods, it would have been enough. If God had humiliated their gods but not killed their firstborn, it would have been enough, right? That basic gist of this prayer is, in fact, that each step of redemption would not be enough, right? Complete redemption is what we're looking for. Each step by itself would not be enough. In fact, it's kind of ludicrous to imagine that bringing us to Mount Sinai but not giving us the Torah would have been enough. What do you mean? That's ridiculous. Now, you might ask, why are there 15 steps in this Dayenu prayer? And the answer is the same as the reason why there are 15 steps in the Seder, which is that there were 15 steps leading up to the temple in Jerusalem. And the word for ma'alot, the word ma'alot, which means steps, is specifically used to describe those 15 steps leading up to the temple in Jerusalem. And so the underlying sort of message of the Seder, like this prayer, is that in the end, the final redemption, the final piece of the redemption is the return to Jerusalem, to building the temple, which is the place where we can atone for our sins and get to a place of true redemption. So just like there are 15 steps in Dayenu, there are 15 steps in the Seder, and the last one recalls Jerusalem, that we hope for a redeemed world where we can return to Jerusalem. I have a lot more to say about Dayenu, but we're going to move on. All right. Josie, can you read for us here? You have to unmute.
Yes, sure. Thank you. In every generation, one is obligated to see oneself as one who personally went out from Egypt. Just as it says in Exodus 13:8, you shall tell your child on that very day, it is because of this that God did for me when I went out from Egypt. Not only were our ancestors redeemed by the Holy One, but even we were redeemed with them. Just as it says in Deuteronomy 6:23, God took us out from there in order to bring us and to give us the land God swore to our ancestors.
All right. So back to our historical development piece. Here is a medieval difference in the Haggadah. Rambam, who is a 12th century Spain, Rambam's text of the Haggadah is a little different. Rambam says, in every generation, one is obligated to show oneself as one who personally went out from Egypt, as opposed to in every generation, one is obligated to see oneself. So how does changing this word change your understanding of the entire passage? Yeah, Bob.
Well, you're supposed to, I guess, manifest in your actions and how you present to the world a freed person who embodies those qualities.
Nice. Right. It's not sufficient just to see yourself. You actually have to manifest it. Nice. Great. So this is also that same passage, Bechol Dor Vador, in every generation, but this is a contemporary adaptation from the new Reform Sidur, new Reform Haggadah that came out this year. So we read together. And today, Wherever slavery remains, Jews taste its bitterness, and wherever oppression persists, our history impels us to act. As in every age and generation, the task is ours, to see ourselves as if we had come out of Egypt. As it is said, make clear to your child on that day, this is because of what Adonai did for me when I myself went forth from Egypt.
Still we remember it is we
who were slaves, we who were
strangers, and therefore we recall these words as well.
You shall not oppress a stranger, for you know the stranger's innermost feelings.
Having been strangers yourselves in the land of Egypt.
Yeah, I love this contemporary reflection of the ancient words. All right, we raise the cup again, but don't drink it, just raise it. Therefore, we owe it to God to thank and to sing, to praise and to honor, to bless and to acclaim the one who has done all these wonders for our ancestors and for us. God took us from slavery to freedom, from sorrow to joy, from mourning to festivity, from a thick darkness to a great light, from enslavement to redemption. Let us sing before God a new song. Hallelujah. And then there's an opportunity to read Psalm 113 and Psalm 114, which we'll just read Psalm 114. When Israel went out from Egypt, the house of Jacob departed from a foreign people. Judah became God's holy one, Israel God's domain. The sea saw them and fled. The Jordan ran backwards. Mountains skipped like rams, hills like lambs. What alarm do you see that you fled? Jordan, that you ran backward? Mountains that you skipped like rams, hills like lambs? Tremble earth at the presence of Adonai, at the presence of the God of Jacob, who turned the rock into a pool of water, flint into a fountain. Beautiful. All right. Those Psalms, wonderful. All right. Now we come to the second cup. The blessing for the second cup is unique to Seder night and concludes the Mageed section. And so read the reflection for me here, with me here. I am ready. I am ready to fulfill the commandment of drinking the second of the 4 cups. This recalls God's promise of redemption to the people of Israel, as it says, I will rescue you from servitude. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who has redeemed us and our ancestors from Egypt and enabled us to reach this night that we may eat matzah and maror. So Adonai, our God and God of our ancestors, enable us to reach other holidays and festivals which come peacefully upon us, rejoicing in the rebuilding of Zion, your city, and joyful in your service. There we shall eat of the offerings and the Pesach sacrifices, whose blood will be acceptably placed upon the wall of your altar. We shall thank you with a new song of redemption and the liberation of our soul. Blessed are you, Adonai, who redeems Israel. And we read together, Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. We drink while reclining. All right. So the next thing that we're going to do is wash our hands and then eat the matzah. And it's traditional to think of washing your hands and eating the matzah as one step. So even though it's 3 separate steps, it's one ritual activity. So it's traditional not to talk between washing our hands ritually and eating the matzah. Therefore, when we sing the order of the Seder, we actually have to sing for all 3 of these before we even get to any of them. So, Kadesh Orchatz Karpas Yachatz Mageed Rochta. Kadesh Orchatz Karpas Yachatz Mageed Rochta Motzi. Kadesh Orchatz Karpas Yachatz Mageed Rochta Motzi Matzah. All right. Yeah, that was fun. Okay. Rabban Gamliel used to say, whoever does not make mention of these 3 things on Pesach has not fulfilled their obligation. And these 3 things are the Pesach offering, the matzah, and the maror. So we now lift the matzah up. Matzah, why do we eat it? To remind ourselves that even before the dough of our ancestors had time to rise, the Supreme King of Kings, the Holy Blessed One, was revealed to them and redeemed them, as it says, and they baked the dough that they brought out of Egypt into unleavened cakes, because it did not rise, because they were expelled from Egypt and they could not delay, and they also had not made preparations for themselves. And so now we wash our hands, and then we'll say the blessings over washing our hands and eating the matzah. I will say this. It is some people's tradition not to eat matzah before Passover, lest you spoil the flavor of the matzah on Passover night. Different people have different lengths of time about which you would choose to not eat it, the matzah. If that's not your custom, you should eat the matzah. If it is your custom, then just don't eat the matzah. You're going to eat the matzah at Seder in a couple weeks anyway. And I'll just say also that the halakha, that is Jewish law, only says that you shouldn't eat the matzah on Erev Seder, that is the day before Passover. So we are well before the day before Passover. So according to Jewish law, you're good, you can eat it. But if your custom is, as it is my custom, not to eat it between Purim and Passover, like a whole month before Passover, then you should not eat it, because you should follow your custom. Okay, so we wash our hands. And we say the blessing over washing our hands. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al nishvat yadayim. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who sanctified us by commanding us to wash our hands. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who extracts bread from the earth. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who sanctified us by commanding us to eat matzah. And you should take a piece from the top matzah and from the middle matzah and eat. Everybody at the table should have some. All right. Kadesh orchatz, karpas yachatz, Mageed rochza, motzi matzah, maror. All right. We now explain the bitter herbs. The bitter herb is the horseradish root. You should take the horseradish root. If you have a peeler, you can peel it, or a knife, and you should cut pieces of the horseradish root so that everybody gets like a piece of fresh horseradish root. The horseradish is not a condiment. The horseradish is a spiritual experience of slavery. You should chew it until you cry. Why do we eat it? To remind ourselves that the Egyptians embittered our ancestors' lives, and as is written, they embittered their lives with hard labor, with mortar and with bricks, and with all sorts of field labor. Whatever the task, they worked them ruthlessly. It's customary to dip the maror in the haroset and to recite, "Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who sanctified us by commanding us to eat maror." And you should eat the maror without reclining, because reclining is about freedom and the maror is about slavery. All right, go ahead and chew. Oh. 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 Cool.
No, they're eating the maror because, it's bitter. It's the bitterness of what the people have to go through.
Well, my eyes definitely teared up. Cleared my sinuses too. Okay. We go back. Kadesh Orchatz Karpas Yachatz Mageed Rochza Motzi Matzah Maror Korech. Rabban Gamliel said we have to explain the matzah, the maror, and the Pesach. So Pesach, why did our ancestors eat the Passover offering in the days of the temple? To remind ourselves that the Holy Blessed One passed over, Pesach means to pass over, passed over our ancestors' houses in Egypt, as it is written, when your children ask you, what do you mean by this ceremony? You shall say, it is the Passover offering to Adonai, because God passed over the houses of the Israel in Egypt when God struck the Egyptians but saved our houses. So now you should take, pass around the bottom matzah and make a sandwich with matzah and the lettuce, which is the other bitter herb, so that you can fulfill the idea of having two different bitter herbs. So matzah and lettuce and haroset all together. Now we don't eat the shank bone, or here we have like a chicken drumstick leg for our which is representing the Passover offering. We don't eat it because it isn't actually the Passover offering, it's just representative. In the times when the temple existed, we ate it, but nowadays we don't eat it. So instead we put haroset in, and haroset is sort of the stand-in for the Passover offering in this sandwich. And we say this sandwich is eaten in memory of Passover in the temple, as Hillel used to celebrate it, because he would sandwich the Pesach lamb between the matzah and the maror and eat them all together in order to observe what it says, with matzot and maror they shall eat it. And then you should eat the sandwich. All right. Kadesh Orchatz Karpas Yachatz Mageed Rochza Motzi Matzah Maror Korech Shulchan Orech. Shulchan Orech is the Seder meal. So we are going to pause here in the formal Seder, though we are going to return to our Seder in about half an hour at 7:35 or 7:40, and we will do the parts that come after the meal together after, which there's still a bunch left to do. But I'm going to leave this room open, and in fact, I'm going to invite people to unmute and to share and to ask questions and to make comments as we eat. So please enjoy your dinner. It is dinner time. I do have to go warm my dinner in the microwave. I'll be back.
I really appreciate this today, the sharing. And I've been to other Seders, and this is a wonderful tradition. And I thank you, Rabbi, for inviting us here today. And I am going to ask you for leave soon. If I disappear, it means it's Ramadan. It's getting close to breaking the fast at sunset. So I thank you again and pray for all of us. Thank you.
We were thinking that it would be time to break the fast.
So better get ready for it, and we'll have dinner. So thank you all
as well.
Sorry that I have to leave. Good night.
So come back when you can.
Yeah, leave it up. I have a very bad connection too, so maybe I leave it open. And so maybe I will come by later. Thank you.
I'm not hearing clearly.
I don't know. It's just the image is shaky. Is anybody else having that trouble?
Having what trouble?
image, it's like lines through it, and it's really bad. So I don't know if it's my laptop or is everybody experiencing that?
Pretty good.
Maybe just me. So I will leave, and I'll leave it on, and if I'm back, I will.
Yeah, mine is not shaking. I don't know. What's that? It's just you.
Yeah, Masarat, mine's not shaky either. And I see you fine. You look
Yeah.
beautiful.
I see everybody nice, Mishka. Hi, Mishka. Nice seeing you.
Hi, Umera. Nice to see you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
I don't see you, but I see that you're there.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to ask leave. Thank you. Bye.
Masarat, be online. You're going? Because
I'm going downstairs to get something to eat.
yeah, okay.
I am going downstairs. I'll see you in a little while.
Bye, Mishka.
So we're going to see each other when? After we open the fast?
Yeah.
Try. I don't know if I'm
Because
going
it's 7:07. After opening the fast, we do our prayers and then we start getting ready for the next.
Yeah, that was the plan. I think they said they'll meet at 7:25. I wrote them the time for today's breaking of fast. And they said we'll just do it with the dates and then we can disperse after that because we need to go and pray.
Yeah.
You can certainly do
Yeah,
that.
and
And then
stay
and then
on.
do the
Yeah,
prayers.
and on because I'm making my preparation for the
Yeah,
dinner.
I have to make my tea too.
I know. So we
Yes. I think I'll be.
Mishka, you have any news? We're joining in again?
I'm sorry?
Are we joining in again or you're done?
Yes.
Okay.
No, I'm going downstairs to get something to eat.
Okay. Okay.
But I
see.
will be,
Yeah,
I'll be back in about a half hour or less.
It's 7:08, so 20 minutes?
More like a half hour. He said 7:35.
25, 35, 7:35.
Yeah, thereabouts. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
I'm so grateful to you and the Muslim community who've chosen to do the logistics to be able to be with us for whatever part you can tonight. Thank you.
It was our pleasure.
Meals at Ramadan, I know it's a big deal.
Yeah, but it was our pleasure. It's always good to have this interfaith gathering, and plus it's Seder. So that's perfect. Umaira, you're not preparing?
Yeah, I am.
Where? How?
I put this on like self-search. Don't show self-view.
Oh, okay. Okay, because I'm like, if you don't prepare, my brother's not going to be able to eat.
I know, yeah. You got it.
Go prepare.
Yeah, I am.
Because it was in there for a while. Because I'll be. I keep food for you. Bring some, please. Bring some food from there. No, you bring. From where? Oh, food court. Yeah, I bring from the food court.
वालेकुम सलाम आइए आप मिस कर
I thought from Sheehan's
सब
office.
खाने को
I thought from Sheehan's office you would bring food. I was like, that's nice of you. I thought from Sheehan's office you would bring food. I was like, that's nice of Sheehan. Huh? Mama,
7:35.
Mama, I have a question. Should I put sugar in this?
I'm back. How's the food? Everybody has some good food? Is it time to break the fast yet? Ramadan?
I believe some folks have had to leave to go break fast.
Yeah, it's 7:25.
Very nice. I'm glad the dinner lines up with the breaking of the fast.
So,
or close.
Rabbi Rafi, is it good form to thank the cooks?
Absolutely.
Thanks to the cooks. It's good
Always
food.
good to thank the cooks. Yeah. I think everybody who got the food from us got a traditional Passover meal. So you should know it is not a kosher for Passover meal. It is kosher for Passover style. Because the kitchen that it was cooked in was not, you have to do a lot of work to kosher your kitchen for Passover. And the kitchen was not koshered. The food is all food that you might eat on Passover, but it was not cooked in a kosher for Passover kitchen. So don't try to save it and eat it on Passover.
Excuse me, I misspoke. The opening of the fast is 7:28.
7:28.
Yes, thank you.
Very good. Is that sunset?
Yes, it is. That is sunset.
Very nice.
Does anybody else, oh, am I muted?
No.
No. Does anyone else think the portions that Risa gave us were a little more than huge?
Absolutely.
I cut mine in half and I still have way too much, but it's yummy.
Well, enjoy it. Eat it in
I
good
am.
health.
Some of us worked hard to make it.
Yeah.
Thank you for your good work. I got the vegetarian option and it's delicious.
What did she give you?
So
Dan?
it seems like it's perhaps couscous rolled up in pepper, different colored pepper strips. So yellow and red peppers.
Unlikely to be couscous.
Yeah.
Quinoa.
It's
quinoa. Quinoa. That's it. Quinoa.
It's
Getting my-
unlikely to be couscous since couscous is not kosher for Passover.
Right. Okay. So quinoa.
Yeah.
My grains are a little sketchy. But it's delicious. Yeah. Now, Rafi, can you tell, you spoke about the piece of the shank that is on the plate. So this is not eaten.
Not eaten.
It is symbolic.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. We don't eat the Passover offering because it's like this like Judaism is like always doing this dance between like being remembering the way that it was in temple times, but not being too close to the way it was in temple times.
Right.
So, yeah, is it a custom or halacha not to eat, let's say, goat or sheep, or or lamb as the meal?
It's custom. In fact,
more custom? Yeah.
In fact, in some parts of the world, it's specifically accustomed to yet to eat
Right.
lamb on Passover, because that's what you did in ancient times. And the Ashkenazi, like your Eastern European custom, came to be to specifically avoid it, lest somebody think that you were trying to actually do the Passover offering. But it is in fact customary in some Jewish communities to specifically do eat it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rabbi, did I hear somewhere that we're not supposed to eat roasted meat?
Well,
or did I make that up?
One of the four questions, one of the Mishnah's version of the four questions, the Mishnah's version of the four questions contains the question, on all other nights we eat roasted, stewed, or boiled meat, but this night we only eat roasted meat.
Only roasted.
Only roasted. That is to say, like on Passover, you're supposed to eat roasted meat. And the reason why is because the Torah explicitly tells the Jews that they were supposed to, the Israelites, that they were supposed to roast the Passover meal. And so it was traditional in the time of the Mishnah to indeed eat roasted meat.
I had it backwards. Thank you.
Nowadays, we don't worry about that so much. We eat boiled and roasted meat on Passover.
Thank you for clarifying.
So, Rabbi Rafi, I may have missed this, but so there's a number of different versions of the Seder, is what I'm understanding. So you said the Mishnah's version, but then there's other rabbis who have their own version. Can you parse that for me?
Yeah, so the Mishnah is codified in about the year 225 of the Common Era. And it's the earliest like written source that we have that looks anything like what we do. Like for example, it has the 4 cups of wine and it has the 4 questions. Well, it doesn't have the 4 questions, but it has some questions that sort of have the same formula as our 4 questions. But then like there's also like the traditional text of the Haggadah is basically fully formed, like with very small variations, by about the 10th century. And what we have today is basically almost the same, like the text of the Haggadah itself. But every Haggadah that's printed like makes some changes to that text or adds different interpretations or adds in new custom. Some people have an orange on the Seder plate, which is to symbolize inclusion of diversity, especially LGBTQ diversity. Some people have a banana on the Seder plate, which is to symbolize fair trade and the importance of incorporating like food justice into what we eat.
Yeah. Labor. Sure.
Labor justice, yeah.
Mhm.
Right. So all of those kinds of new interpretations, like, might be called contemporary, but they are also contained in the Haggadah. But when I say, when I say the Mishnah has a version, like, if you open up basically any Haggadah today, the text of the 4 questions is what's here on the right. But in fact, the earliest versions of this text only have 3 questions. So yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Historical development over time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sort of reminds me of getting at that question you asked, or there's a segment where, you know, the idea was those who expound on the story are to be praised. And so this continual exposition and growth of the tradition over time.
That's exactly right.
Right. Are any parts ever are there ever significant revisions or changes that are omissions? I mean, there's expansion. Is there ever?
Yeah, we're gonna get to a section later on where, like, there's a part of the Haggadah that's actually sort of really uncomfortable, and I thought about not doing it in an interfaith setting because it's directly against basically Christians who persecuted Jews for 1,500 years.
Yeah.
And longer, maybe.
Yeah.
And so, like, there's this passage that's like particularly anti-Christian specifically, and I thought about just leaving it out. And when we get there, we'll talk about some Haggadot completely leave it out.
Right.
Because they're uncomfortable with it in our contemporary world. But I sort of feel like tradition and reinterpretation, like, you should leave it in, but talk about why it makes you uncomfortable.
Right.
Good. It's sort of my feeling.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyone else have any questions or thoughts, or feel free to unmute and share your thinking as we eat.
I liked your comment about temporary status versus green card before, and it's directly relevant right now with regard to the situation of the Afghan folks, 70,000 of them, and also the question of the Ukrainians, that what's been extended so far is an immigration status. It's only temporary status, and it's only good for 2 years, and if you don't apply for asylum in the first year, you may not be eligible to apply for asylum. And so it's a situation now being faced by at least 70,000 people inside here, just the Afghans, not even including the people who have come to the border and are being generously allowed to apply for asylum. But the asylum seekers who are given temporary status have no status for the long haul, and so the history, it's another example of not just history repeating itself, but empire repeating itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Also,
that's not a
there's
good question, though. I guess that's more of a comment.
No, I think comments are also definitely desired. I think there are 2 sides to it, right? Where you look at what's going on in the world right now and are able to make that connection. And then there's also this question about our self-image. Do we feel like we are temporarily here, or do we feel like we're permanently here? Are we in a process of transience, or are we in a state of permanence? And what does it mean for us, like, to interpret it one way or the other? As a people who has been forced to emigrate and have chosen to emigrate, like, many times over the last couple thousand years, like both of those have happened, there's like a big question, like, wow, are we at home here? Have we landed? Is this a place where we will never leave? And what does it mean to think of ourselves that way?
Mm. 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 There seems there. I mean, I don't know if you want to address this, but it seems like the yeah. I guess I'm thinking of the Seder. The phrase that's coming to mind is it next year in Jerusalem? Is
Mhm.
that yeah? So the notion of Jerusalem in the I guess was that true in the Mishnah early on, as well as then the later development of the Seder? I wonder.
Yeah, I'm not sure when that is added, but I can look. I can look it up.
Well, I'm just thinking about it in terms of what you said. Like, is this our home?
Mm-hmm.
Are we established here, or are we being pulled back to Jerusalem? Are we being pulled? Is that true home?
Right.
Is this temporary home and that true home?
I think that has always been the case at the Seder, is that there's always been sort of the potential for a redeemed world. And sometimes that redeemed world is called Jerusalem. And that we're hoping for a return to a redeemed world.
Okay, so Jerusalem then takes on more of a metaphoric. Is that what you're saying?
I think so. I mean, I think it's both. I think it's both like an actual physical place and also a metaphoric place.
Hmm. 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 Hmm.
But it's very ancient that we have that. Like
yeah.
Like beginning with this year we are slaves, next year we'll be free. This year in exile, next year in Jerusalem. That's like a very old text.
Is it?
And then closing the Seder with next year in Jerusalem again, also very ancient.
Yeah.
Sort of always longing for that, the potential, like what that looks like in a redeemed world. Like when we split the matzah in two and we hold the bigger side for the future redemption. Because the future redemption will be even bigger.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I was reminded when you were actually doing that text, the future redemption, I was thinking of a passage from Abraham Joshua Heschel that I was reading this morning in a book that I'm going to be leading a discussion on. He was speaking about actually speaking about Sabbath and the Sabbath's relationship to shalom and to the redemption. So
I love that.
Yeah.
I think that's Heschel's best book. But Of the Prophets is also really good.
Yeah.
But I think the Sabbath is more accessible.
Yeah.
So there are two things on the Seder plate that we never eat.
Right.
The egg and the bone.
Oh, we don't eat the egg.
No, just there.
I haven't eaten it, just for the record.
Oh yeah, it represents. So oftentimes at Seders we serve eggs. Often at Seders we serve eggs. But the one that's like on the Seder plate is just supposed to be looked at. And the same reason actually that we don't touch the bone and we don't eat it, which is that the egg is actually there to symbolize a sacrifice that we no longer offer. So I was
What's the
thinking
sacrifice
the sacrifice, the festival sacrifice.
of the egg?
The egg symbolizes the festival offering, and the bone symbolizes the Passover offering.
Paschal offering, that I knew.
Yeah.
Excuse me, our fast opened. So we're
Oh,
just
with the dates.
Yes, with the dates. So we're going to be, I don't know if I'm on video or not. I have no idea.
You are, please.
Oh, I am.
Oh, now you're not.
Oh,
Now
I
you
am.
are.
Oh, okay. So here's the date. And thank you for waiting for us. May you all be blessed.
May you be blessed.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for
And
doing this.
you should have a blessed Ramadan. Ramadan
Thank
Kareem.
you. We appreciate it.
Thank
Happy
you.
Seder to you, all of you too.
Thank you.
And Humara, we're getting dates out also.
Bye-bye.
Yes, I sent you the dates, I know.
Yeah, these are the Mazdool ones, the best.
They are the
Oh,
best.
they're good.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
often break my fast on Medjol dates as well.
Oh, that's good. That's something else we share.
Yeah, we share a lot of things though.
Yeah.
We do.
Okay, guys, thank you so
Okay,
much.
guys, thank you. Bye-bye.
And so I will say, as I was preparing for this Seder, one of the things that I was thinking about is like, what did in fact Jesus do in the first century? And the answer is we don't know a whole lot about it. We have some guesses, but his Seder was definitely different from ours. In so many different ways. Most of what we do is in fact like 7th century. And then I was thinking about the Passover offering, which like internal to the Christian scriptures is a debate about whether Jesus's death symbolizes whether the Last Supper is him eating the Passover Seder, or whether he is in fact the Passover offering.
Right.
And like John holds that Jesus is in fact the Passover lamb, and the Synoptic Gospels have Jesus participating in the Passover Seder, and therefore could not possibly be the Passover lamb, which is killed on the day before the Seder. And it all depends on how you understand the 3 days. Is it the third day, like meaning 1, 2, and then on the third, or is it 3 days that pass? You know, it's all how do you count that? And the Synoptic Gospels disagree with John about that. Anyway, I was thinking about how to include that in this discussion of the historical development of the Seder, but there wasn't any really convenient thing to tie that to. Yeah.
Rafi, I had a thought as you were speaking earlier. There's striking parallels between what you were talking about in terms of the Seder as an inclusive feast, and there's a book on the church in Corinth and the conflict there, the trouble at the table. I'm trying to remember the name of the author. It's been a while since I read it. But the interesting thing is that the debate between the Christians in Corinth, with Paul very much coming in on the rabbinic side on this, is that it's an inclusive, it's to be an inclusive table and everybody's to be present. And Christians have tended to deal with that as a Christian innovation rather than as the essence of Judaism. And so that was really helpful to me. And it wasn't about the Seder, it was about the meal gathering, the love feast that was the worship service for that time, which was very much built on those guild banquets of the Romans, which came in many forms. So not just a symposium, but at which traditionally only the free men got to be on the inside, though you might get something to eat on the outside.
Right.
And so it was really good to hear that piece of it, but it makes me think that we need to have a whole lot more detailed discussion about these parallels and differences, because we've been so, the breakup was so bad that we haven't really looked at the Jewish practices that were inherent in those early Christian gatherings before the break. Before the institute and before the destruction of Jerusalem, which is when that Corinthian thing probably took place. So I'm not sure of the years on that. But so that doesn't directly answer your question. It just says that the same dynamic was going on in the early church as early as 10, 12 years after Christ, as was taking place in terms of the adoption of that Greco-Roman stuff, but also then having to be critical in its adoption and contrast with it in those Christian communities. Anyway, I'll check.
Thank you. No, I think sort of in doing this reading and research, I found some very, very powerful essays that were sort of taking like stock of John's interpretation of Jesus as the Passover offering and showing how the ways in which that was continuous with Jewish thinking and the ways in which it was kind of innovative and discontinuous with Jewish thinking, right? Like we do have a tradition of sacrifices that are expiatory, that like you make this sacrifice and the sin goes away. But the Passover offering is exactly not that kind of offering. And so when John like conflates these two different types of offerings, basically kind of like the Yom Kippur type of offering and the Passover type of offering, and he joins them, he's actually doing something really innovative and like spiritually cool that is discontinuous with previous Jewish or Israelite cultic traditions of sacrifice, where he says like, oh, like this offering is expiatory. Even the Passover offering, which I just think like it was a very interesting essay.
Is there any, I mean, what's done with the imagery of the lamb that's slaughtered and the blood put on the lintels in order to have the avoid the plague? I wonder if that could be linked in with it.
Yeah, I mean the dipping in the charoset. The charoset is sort of like thick wine covered apples in our iteration of it, but I think what it really was originally was kind of a relish that kind of looked like blood, and like the dipping of the lettuce in the relish was to recall the dipping of the lamb's blood on the doorposts. Like we have moved on from that particular interpretation, and now the charoset symbolizes the mortar, because when you look at it, it looks more like mortar than it does like relish, like blood.
I heard that, and somewhere, I think actually Arthur Waska had discussed this, but I don't know if he originated it, but the idea that somehow the composition of the charoset was like the Shir HaShirim, like the Song of Songs, had a connection there to the indwelling presence, to the Shekhinah, in a certain way, almost echoing with the aromatic nature of it. Almost echoed the spices of the incense.
Nice.
I don't know how much support that has in any of the texts, but it's an interesting
I never came across
idea.
that, but that doesn't mean that it's
an interesting idea.
Interpretation. Yeah. Growing up, we didn't have this apples and the apples and cinnamon and wine is a very delicious charoset, but I grew up with one that was dates and almonds and cinnamon.
Yeah. It's
And
Sephardic.
Yeah. Sephardic. And we would roll the date balls into bricks before the Seder and construct a pyramid, which we would then pass around. And as everybody took a brick of charoset from the pyramid, we deconstructed the pyramids that the Israelites built and undid that slavery. I thought that was fun.
Whose idea was that? Or did your parents get it from your mom get it from somewhere?
I'm sure my parents got it from somewhere, but I don't know. I don't know where. Love it. Yeah, we did that. My parents still do that every year. And I have done it at my Seders, but you have to, last year I broke my food processor on those dates. So you have to get a good food processor to beat those dates down. All right. Well, let's pick up where we left off. I hope everybody has been enjoying their meal. And we're going to continue with the next step in the order of the Seder. Kadesh Orchatz, Karpas Yachatz, Mageed Rochza, Motzi Matzah, Maror Koresh, Shulchan Orech, Tzafun. All right, Tzafun. So we now find the matzah that we hid away at the beginning. And this matzah is a reminder of the Passover offering that we offered in the days of the temple, which was eaten on a full stomach. So somehow they got the idea that you should eat the Passover offering after dinner, which that doesn't make any sense to me and is clearly not what the book of Exodus meant, but that is how the tradition understood what they did in the temple. My guess is that they didn't do it that way in the temple and that the later rabbis just completely misunderstood it, but whatever. We still eat the matzah at the end of the meal. Now, when we teach the laws about the afikomen in the Mishnah actually say you shall not have after your Passover Seder an afikomen. You shall not have an afikomen. And in order to understand why it says that, you have to know that afikomen meant after party, right? Afikomen was the after party that you had after a symposium. And the whole point of Seder is that it should be a home ritual in your house, and then you should go to, you should be with the people in your home and go to sleep. You should not go out to another after party. Then they misunderstood that phrase, you shall not have after your Passover Seder and afikomen, to mean you shall not have any food after your afikomen. And then the afikomen came to be referred to as this piece of the matzah that was hidden away. And there are a lot of traditions about hiding the matzah, which is like sometimes the parents hide it and the children have to find it. Sometimes the children hide it and the parents have to find it. Sometimes they make elaborate quiz puzzles for the kids to do to try to find their way to the afikomen. Anyway, today we'll just pick up the bigger half of our matzah and make sure to pass it around so that everybody can eat a piece of it. And that will be our afikomen. I don't think yeah, great. Okay. Kadesh Orchatz, Mageed Rochza, Motzi Matzah, Maror Koresh, Shulchan Orech, Tzafun Barech. So we now pour the third cup of wine or grape juice. This is the third cup which we use for the recitation of the grace after meals. Now, the grace after meals that we say on Passover is the same as the grace after meals that we say all the time in our tradition, but they have found in Geniza fragments in the Cairo Geniza examples of graces after meals that were specifically written for the Passover Seder that are different from the traditional, the normal everyday grace after meals, which is interesting. One thing that I kept in a lot of the grace after meals, we're gonna read through some of it. I kept it in this Haggadah because some of the themes of the grace after meals pick up on themes from the Seder. It's almost like it was written for this first and then became for all other meals. It's actually really cool. Or maybe another way to say it is the themes of Passover are themes that are so ubiquitous in Jewish tradition that we mention them every time we eat bread and bless afterward. So Daniel, would you like to read Psalm 126 in English for us? You have to unmute. Yeah, great.
Yep, I'd be glad to. A reaching up song. When God returned us to Zion from exile, we thought we were dreaming. Then our mouths filled with laughter and our cheers were on our tongue. The other nations saw and said, Adonai has done great things for them. Adonai has done great things for us, and we were very glad. Return us again to freedom, Adonai, like streams long dry, to the Negev returning. Those who sow in tears will reap in joy. The farmer wants to weep when he buries the precious seed, but singing, he comes back, his arms filled with grain.
I found this translation of Psalm 126 to be particularly beautiful.
Yeah.
It also answered for me. I never really understood why the farmer was crying, but its investment is, it hurts.
Yeah.
Like, instead of turning that money into something you need right now, or those seeds into flour right now, you have to put aside some huge portion of your crop to be able to make sure that you have seeds to plant for the next season. And that is hard. Yeah, I never understood it until this translation. I've sung it my whole life in Hebrew. I'm like, why is the farmer crying? I didn't get it, but I think it's very powerful. Friends, we join in thanks and praise.
May the eternal name be now and forever.
Now and forever.
May the eternal name be praised now and forever. Friends and teachers gathered here, with your permission, let us praise God, the source of all we have eaten.
Praise be our God, the source of all we have eaten, whose
for goodness sustains our lives.
Praise to you and praise to your name. You nourish all the world with grace and goodness, love and compassion. Your very name affirms your bounty. For you are sustainer of all that lives, the giver of goodness, who assures sustenance throughout creation. To you we offer praise, Adonai our God, the one who nourishes all the world. Hazan et Hakol. Our voices rise in thanks for the heritage of a precious, good, and spacious land, for the exodus from Egypt, right? Mentioned in our regular Birkat Hamazon in the Grace After Meals every day. For the exodus from Egypt, freedom from the house of oppression, for the Torah by which you guide and teach us, for the gifts of mercy, life, and grace, and for the food by which you support and sustain us always. For this we thank you, Adonai our God, as it is written, and you shall eat your fill, and thank Adonai your God for the good land that God has given you. We offer you praise, Adonai, for the land and for the sustenance.
Amen.
Our living source, cherish us, sustain us, nourish and support us, grant us respite that we may soon find relief from all our troubles. Soon may the sacred city of Jerusalem be rebuilt. May it happen in our days. We offer you praise, the one who with compassion is building Jerusalem. Amen. Day by day you were, you are, and you will be for us always our source of goodness and compassion, blessing us with grace and love, well-being of body, well-being of spirit, redemption and comfort, sustenance and care, life and peace, and all that is good. And may we never lack your generosity. Let a messianic age enter the world by our merit and through mercy, a time when the reign of righteousness will prevail, a time when we will see a tower of truth and love rise from seeds, it should say, that David sowed and his descendants nurtured. May the one who makes peace in the high heavens make peace for us, for all Israel, and for all who dwell on earth. And let us say Amen.
Amen.
Stand in awe, you who strive for holiness, and in awe fear no lack or want. Young lions grow hungry, but those who seek God never feel deprived. Thank God for a life that is good. Thank God for kindness unending, for you open your hand to gratify our desires. Blessed is the one who trusts in God, whose trust is in God alone. As I grow from youth to ripe old age, I long to see true justice in the world. No righteous person cast off and forsaken, no hungry child begging for bread. Adonai, give strength to our people. Adonai, bless our people with peace.
Amen.
The third cup of wine follows the tradition of concluding the blessings after the meal with a cup of wine, which is still practiced on Shabbat in some communities. When I grew up, when I went to college, it was the custom of the Hillel that I went to college at to always do Birkat Hamazon over a cup of wine. And so whoever was leading the Birkat Hamazon would lead it over a cup of wine. And we did that anytime we did the Birkat Hamazon on Shabbat. Not usually on weekdays, but on Shabbat, yes. In most Jews, even ones who do Birkat Hamazon after every meal, only do Birkat Hamazon over a cup of wine on Passover. But it is actually traditional to do it anytime you do the grace after meals. I am ready to, read with me. I am ready to fulfill the commandment of drinking the third of the 4 cups. This recalls God's promise of redemption to the people of Israel, as it says, I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and through extraordinary judgments. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen.
Amen.
All right, now we pour the 4th cup of wine. Again, pour for somebody else if you can. And now we take out our heretofore empty cup, the cup of Elijah, and pass it around your Seder plate, your Seder table, and let everybody pour a little of their wine from their cup into it so that it fills up. Now, growing up, we explained that this symbolizes that bringing redemption is a responsibility of every person, that we all contribute to the coming redemption. Well, that's a great interpretation. That's beautiful. I love that I grew up with that interpretation. But where did all this come from? How old is it? Is it connected to the opening of the door, right, at the beginning of the Seder? What about the 4 verses that begin, pour out your wrath? Is this also connected to Elijah? So obviously some of these questions are a little out of order in terms of, if you haven't seen the Haggadah, you don't necessarily recognize them, but okay. Here is some history of Elijah's cup, the 5th cup. Again, this was a rabbit hole, like I'm not telling you. I mean, I gave you bullet points, but it's like pages and pages and pages of historical, like intricate details of why do we have this cup. So today in many communities, it is customary to pour a 5th cup, that is the cup of Elijah, but not to drink it. The Talmud actually mentions a 5th cup in the name of an early sage, Rabbi Tarfon, who is actually a Mishnaic sage, but it doesn't appear in the Mishnah. It just appears in a Talmudic quote of source that purports to be from the same time period as the Mishnah, but it doesn't exist in other places. So it's one of these, like, that doesn't mean that Rabbi Tarfon didn't say it, but we have no independent verification. It doesn't exist anywhere else. All right. And there are a lot of folks who think that that when the Talmud mentions a fifth cup, that it was a scribal error. Rashi thought that it was a scribal error and it should have said the fourth cup. The Ravad suggests that it's an ancient custom to have a fifth cup of wine at Seder, but the source text that he uses is not a source text that is as ancient as the Ravad thought it was. So like, we can't really base ourselves on his proof. In the 9th century, there is in fact evidence that in Babylonia, people poured and drank a fifth cup, which we do not do. The Rambam in 12th century Spain rules that one should pour and drink a fifth cup, but his son, the Rambam's son, testified that in practice, Rambam himself, who wrote that it was the correct custom to pour and drink a fifth cup, only drank 4 cups. Some early authorities explicitly prohibit pouring and drinking a fifth cup. For example, the Shulchan Aruch, that was 16th century, not an early authority, a later authority, but based on the early authorities, Shulchan Aruch was extremely opposed to the fifth cup. Should there be a fifth cup? The Gaon of Vilna thought that only Elijah, the Talmud describes Elijah as the solver of all halakhic disputes. Anytime in the Talmud where there's a dispute that they don't know the answer to, they say teku, and teku stands for Tishbi Yavo, right? The Elijah the prophet will come and tell us what the answer is. So in other words, we won't know what's the correct interpretation until the Messianic era, until Elijah comes, right? So the Vilna Gaon says, should there be a fifth cup or shouldn't there be a fifth cup is one of these arguments that only Elijah can answer. And that might be one reason why the cup was called the Elijah's cup. Okay, here's another piece. Remember how every time we've drank from a cup, we quote from these verses that have these phrases of redemption? The passage of redemption from Exodus chapter 6, which is connected to the 4 cups. I will bring you out from beneath the burdens of Egypt. I will rescue you. I will redeem you. I will take you to be my people. Turns out, actually, if you keep reading the next part of that passage, there's a 5th verb. It's like we only told you 4 of them before, but the 5th one is, I will bring you into the land. Right? So I will bring you into the land. That's the final redemption. That's the okay, actually coming into the land is the redemption. Okay, Rabbi Chaim ben Venisti, who was a 17th century Constantinopolitan rabbi, writes that you have to pour a full new cup for each of the 4 cups. So if you had a little bit of wine left over from the previous cup, you shouldn't keep it in your cup and just refill. You have to have a full new cup of wine. So if you have a little extra cup, you should pour it into the large communal pitcher in the middle of the table. That's for everybody's leftover dregs from the previous cup. He thinks that custom is actually the origin of Elijah's cup. First, they were already collecting the dregs of the other cups, not intentional, not like, okay, now we're going to pass around Elijah's cup and everybody's going to pour in some from their cup to bring about the coming redemption, but actually oh, you didn't finish your 2nd cup or your 3rd cup, here, pour the rest into this communal pitcher. And only after that did they start calling that thing Elijah's cup. This is one of these things that we've talked about a couple of times over the course of the Seder, that elements of the Seder originally had very practical functions, or people really understood why we did them. And only when people forgot why we did it, did they then start to try to imbue it with spiritual significance. There's this story of a community where, as they were dancing the Torah around the the sanctuary on Simchat Torah, on the celebration of the Torah day, every time they got to a particular spot, everybody would crouch, and then you'd come to that spot, crouch, and then keep going. And like just everybody did that at that particular spot. Somebody who was new to the community was like, "What's with the crouching?" And everybody was like, "I don't know. That's just what we do." Finally, they found a really old guy who remembered everything, and he said, "Yeah, before we moved to this synagogue, when we were still at the synagogue over in downtown, there was a chandelier that hung too low, and we would duck under the chandelier, right? But now we don't have the chandelier. We're in a whole new building, but we still duck at that exact spot." This is Jews making fun of themselves about the way that we hold on to traditions. All right. The Mishkan HaSeder Haggadah, which is a contemporary, just published this year, Haggadah, explains Elijah's cup this way. Who hasn't read? Tim, do you want to read?
Okay. Known as a miracle worker, Elijah is legendary for acts of kindness and healing and for raising up the poor and the weak. At the end of his days on earth, his disciple Elisha had a vision of Elijah carried aloft in a fiery chariot. Many are the folk tales of Elijah's return to earth to befriend and serve the sick, the helpless, and the suffering. Those tales, in which he had often appears as a beggar or a sage, offer a glimpse alternative to the rampant poverty and persecution that afflicted many Jewish communities. The vast storehouse of Elijah legends post to the Messianic age. A future redemption when the most difficult conflicts will be resolved. And indeed, Elijah is known as the forerunner of the Messiah, a messenger from God who inspires hope where there is grief and teaches humble faith where there is doubt and uncertainty.
Nice. So Elijah is really connected to the Seder in a lot of ways. And this Shabbat, this coming Shabbat, which is the Shabbat before Passover, we read the last words of prophecy in the Hebrew scriptures, which are from the book of Malachi. And the last verses are, "And behold, in the days to come, Elijah will come and will restore the hearts of the fathers to the children and the hearts of the children to their fathers," right? In other words, like what Elijah does in the end of days is resolve difficult conflicts, not just halachic disputes, but also the conflicts between family members who don't get along. Very powerful. All right. Now, there is a custom that while we pour Elijah's cup and we raise up Elijah's cup and we open the door and we read these 4 verses. Now, the recitation of these 4 verses is very late. The 4 verses are, "Pour out your fury on the nations that do not know you, and upon the kingdoms that do not invoke your name, for they have devoured Jacob and destroyed his home. Pour out your wrath upon them. May your blazing anger overtake them. Pursue them in wrath and destroy them from under the heavens of Adonai." So we invoke Elijah and the future promise and hope of redemption, and then we read these verses, which are all about our righteous anger over the persecution that we have been visited upon us. And traditionally, these are really understood to be kind of an anti-Christian polemic, right? So crying out over suffering and calling for God to avenge the Jewish people against mostly Christian oppression is a common feature of Jewish prayer and literary creation after the Byzantine era. It's customary to open the doors. So the opening of the doors actually is a custom that preceded the recitation of these verses. And it's connected to the opening of the doors that we did at the beginning of the Seder, when we when we said, let all of our hungry come and eat, we open the doors for that. It used to be the custom to actually have the door of your house open for the entire Seder. But we no longer do that, in part because there were a lot of dangerous places and we didn't keep our doors open because of the danger to the Jewish people. But also, Jews migrated to colder climates, and it was really cold to keep your house door open for that whole time. So instead of having your door open the whole time, we opened at the beginning and at the end to symbolize as if the door had been open the whole time. So it actually was very traditional to open your door at the end of the Seder. And only then did the opening of the door connect to Elijah. And so one thought of how that connects is that opening the door shows our faith and hope that it would be safe to open our doors, even though in many times and places it wasn't. So how do you feel about the inclusion of these verses and the juxtaposition of invoking God's wrath at the same time as invoking our hope in Elijah and the coming redemption? What do you think about this?
I needed you to tell me they were anti-Christian. I mean, I guess I get it. But it's the same way I feel about a lot of what's in the Psalms, where we're reading this really nice, very uplifting, hopeful stuff, and then we're dashing the heads of the children against the rocks. It's kind of that juxtaposition, I think, within human beings between hope and righteous anger.
Nice. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I've been through all sorts of iterations on what to do with these verses. My father used to sing them sotto voce, so they could barely be heard. This, I think, since we did that for a while, and then we just decided these were not going to ever be read again in our house. We open the door and sing Eliyahu Hanavi. But it does not, to me, seem fitting to have something like that at this point.
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment. I've always felt uncomfortable about them. I know people who relish chanting these verses. You look forward to it. I don't think ripping the scab off the wound is necessarily the best way to go about that somehow. But
yeah, there are a lot of Haggadot that simply omit this passage. Back to Daniel's question about whether other things get omitted. Definitely is the answer. I mentioned it earlier also, back to that question, like the part of the Haggadah, the middle part that's about telling the story, right? There are a lot of different ways to do that. What we did tonight was the traditional text of the Haggadah. But if have very young people at your Seder, for example, like I would recommend not reading any of that, and instead just like encouraging the kids to tell you or to act out the story of the Exodus from Egypt. Who's the bad guy? Who's the main character? What did they do then? And baby Moses on the Nile, and here's a basket, and here's a blue sheet that can pretend to be the water, and now we're all gonna run around and pretend that we're like baby Moses in a basket on the Nile, right? Like there's a way to do this like very interactive telling of the story. What we did was much more sort of cerebral, right? But which is also good and has its place. Anyway, so in other words, there are some Haggadot that take out that whole middle section and replace it with a different way to tell the story, which is also cool. Anyway, yeah, so some people replace these verses with a poem like pour out your love on, and then like a list of things that we want God to pour out God's love on. I guess to me, there's something freeing in some way about releasing our own anger about the injustices that we have that are done to us, and turning that anger over to God. That is to say, God is a vessel that is big enough that God can hold the anger in a way that maybe we can't. And by saying, God, we're giving you the anger, it's your responsibility to pour out your wrath. We are absolving ourselves of the responsibility to have wrath with respect to our oppressors. It frees us by letting God take care of the wrath. It frees us to have a different kind of response to oppression. Also, like, sometimes I kind of want God to enact wrathful vengeance against oppressors. I think about, how at the end of Biden's big speech in Poland, he said, 6 words that got all the press about that guy can't be in power anymore. Right? Like, obviously, like, all the press was about how, oh, it's a gaffe, blah, 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 whatever. Totally uninteresting. But I feel like Biden's righteous anger is very understandable.
So how would you construct something there to do that, to say, there's all this stuff. I want God to take this on. I want to give it over to God to.
Well, to me, that's what these verses are doing. Why it's not pour out my wrath, it's pour out your wrath. Like, this is God's fury, not my fury.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Anyway, yeah. So kind of a harsh part of the Seder.
Very. What a downer.
What about
Great. Yeah.
when you say if God has the same enemies that I do, all of my enemies are also the enemies of God, then what have I made of God?
Yeah, I love that, right? Like, we've got to be careful about that. About saying so and so is an enemy of God. I think that's part of this too, right? Let God take care of the vengeance. We should not take care of the vengeance.
If I could comment on something, I don't know. It's not for me to suggest what Judaism should and shouldn't do with its practices, but I think there's a real tension between the 2 readings of the passage that you've given, and I would wonder if it's possible to have it both ways. And then I would wonder if it's not possible to have it both ways. What one would, we talked before about we add, we don't subtract. What would one add, as has happened with so much else in the practice, to take it in the direction that you're talking about? And another thought that occurs to me, and it's not my situation to evaluate the situation of Judaism again, but the question is, sometimes the prayers of those who've had no power and been oppressed are important to remember. But when we have power ourselves, it's important to be careful about how we pray them and how they can be misconstrued.
Yeah, I think that's right.
I think the anger, right, the justified anger, the needs to be somehow, it begs transformation. Not to say that that's an easy process, but that energy needs to be transformed into healing actions in some way. Healing within ourselves in terms of letting go of it, or healing in terms of our relationships with the nations. It needs to be transformed and evolve. I think that it needs to be spoken to in that, rather than just leaving it at the pour out your wrath.
Yeah. Deborah Lipstadt writes about it. Deborah Lipstadt's a historian of the Holocaust. She says, many Seder participants are decidedly uncomfortable with the short paragraph that asks God wrath to be poured out on the nations that do not call out in God's name. Some modern Haggadot have deleted this paragraph, finding it too pregnant with vengeance and revenge, defying the Seder's universal themes of freedom and liberation, and made their compilers uncomfortable. I, on the other hand, love it. Why my infatuation with this hard-hitting paragraph? I picture the many beleaguered Jews, particularly in Europe, for whom Passover, with its proximity to Easter, was a dangerous time.
Right.
I imagine Jews who spend much of the year fearful that the non-Jewish world might violently turn on them, as they did, like, repeatedly around Easter, because Jews were branded as Christ killers. They knew that they would have little recourse to protect themselves. Suddenly, for one short paragraph, they opened the door of their homes. Of course, most of their non-Jewish neighbors had by then retired for the night, and publicly told the world what they wished for those who had done them evil. For one brief moment, they could let their desire for justice be heard publicly. They did not have to cower in fear. And yet, they did not ask God to let them pour out their own wrath. Even now, when Jewish machismo briefly appeared, they asked God to render judgment and to punish only those who did not call out in God's name. That is, those nations that failed to adhere to ethical standards. For one brief shining moment, the Jews stood tall. The playing field was more than equal. As the Jew turned to the judge of all the world, the same judge Abraham challenged in Genesis and called upon that judge to do justice. And then, as suddenly as it began, it ended. The door was shut, the Jews sat down, the Seder continued, and all returned as it had been and would remain for too many years.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's powerful. Yeah.
Ooh, yeah.
Definitely shows a.
And I get it.
Yep. It's
All
not
right.
an easy thing.
One more comment, Rabbi.
Yeah, go ahead.
One of the things that I had heard when I was growing up was that part of the reason for opening the door was so that the Christian neighbors could look in and could see that the Jews were not slaughtering a Christian child to eat at their Seder.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting that that's the interpretation that we gave for this? I'm sure that people said that in Europe and continue to say it, right? Lest they think we have nothing to hide, lest they think that we're making matzah from the blood of Christian babies, which they did kill us for. Yeah. I think you, especially at an interfaith Seder, right? I thought about just skipping it. And I was like, no, like, this is a part of the story. We have to confront the violence, the fear, like what it actually means to have a history of oppression, and what that means for our responsibility as free, powerful people.
I'm really glad you included it, Rafi. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
All right, so now we're going to sing about Elijah. Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu, 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 Imera v'yameinu, Yavo Eleinu. Mashiach Davin, Mashiach ben David. All right. Kadesh Orchatz, Karpas Yachatz, Mageed Rochza, Motzi Matzah, Maror Korech, Shulchan Orech, Tafun Barech, Hallel Nirtza. Oops, I didn't mean to say Nirtza. Hallel. All right, so Hallel is a set of psalms that we say on holidays, and which is included also in the Passover Haggadah. The final one of those psalms is Psalm 118. And so I've given us Psalm 118, and we're just going to read that one. It's the Hallel is traditionally, I think, 115 through 118, but we're just going to read the last psalm. But it's a pretty long psalm, so we'll enjoy the this. Edith, can you read for us?
Praise the Lord, for God is good. God's steadfast love is eternal. Let Israel declare, God's steadfast love is eternal. Let the house of Aaron declare, God's steadfast love is eternal. Let those who fear the Lord declare, God's steadfast love is eternal.
All right, keep going.
In distress, I called upon the Lord. The Lord answered me and brought me relief.
All right, stop there for a second. The word distress is Matzah, which means from the narrow place. And it's the same root as the word Mitzrayim, which means which is Egypt. But the reason why the Torah calls Egypt Mitzrayim is because Egypt in the ancient world was extremely narrow. Like all of that desert wasn't Egypt. Egypt was the Nile River and like a narrow strip on either side of the Nile. So the reason why Egypt is called the narrow country, narrows, is because it was like a narrow column next to the Nile River, which flooded and provided for rich agriculture. But we understand symbolically Mitzrayim, the narrow places, to be in every generation. We have to figure out what our narrow place is, what our place of constriction is, what our place of distress is. And Seder night is the night where we confront that constriction, that narrow place, and come out into wider freedom. So this psalm, right, especially in the Hebrew, is very deeply connected to this concept of leaving Egypt. All right, keep going.
The Lord is on my side. I have no fear. What can man do to me? With the Lord on my side as my helper, I will see the downfall of my foes. It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in mortals. It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust the great. All nations have beset me. By the name of the Lord, I will surely cut them down. They beset me, they surround me. By the name of the Lord, I will surely cut them down. They have beset me like bees. They shall be extinguished like burning thorns. By the name of the Lord, I will surely cut them down. You pressed me hard. I nearly fell, but the Lord helped me. The Lord is my strength and might. God has become my deliverance. The tents of the righteous, the tents of the victorious resound with joyous sounds of deliverance. The right hand of the Lord is triumphant. The right hand of the Lord is exalted. The right hand of the Lord is triumphant. I shall not die, but live and proclaim the works of the Lord. The Lord punished me severely, but did not hand me over to death. Open the gates of victory for me, that I may enter them and praise the Lord. This is the gateway to the Lord. The victorious shall enter through it. I praise you, for you have answered me and have become my deliverance. The stone that the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone. This is the Lord's doing. It is marvelous in our sight. This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us exalt and rejoice on it. O Lord, deliver us. O Lord, let us prosper. May he who enters be blessed in the name of the Lord. We bless you from the house of the Lord. The Lord is God. God has given us light. Bind the festival offering to the horns of the altar with cords. You are my God, and I will praise you. You are my God, and I will extol you. Praise the Lord, for God is good. God's steadfast love is eternal.
Yeah, you can see that this psalm accidentally got a little bit of the instruction manual of what to do while you were saying this psalm, accidentally got interposed into this psalm. Which, like, when we sing this on Hallel, it does not rhyme or scan. It is, like, this line is extremely hard to sing. Isru chag ba'avoti mad karnot hamizbeach. Very hard to sing. Okay. So on Passover night, we do, in addition to Hallel, songs of praise, we add in a whole bunch of songs. So we're going to do, we're not going to do this one, though I will say one of the interpretations that I read about why we have this song is because it's a night of questions. And just as we begin the Seder with questions, so we end the Seder also with questions. Who knows one, who knows two, right? It's this 13 questions. So I do think that was interesting. I had never thought of that before. Like, I'm not sure why this is included, but we're going to sing the one little goat because I think it's important. To have a Seder, you should sing Haggadah. I even said that one little goat might be the hero of the Seder. What is one little goat referring to, right? One little goat is the Jewish people, which is continually attacked in every generation by all these bigger empires, bigger and bigger empires, which swallow up the previous empires. But ultimately, right, God is above all of those empires. And I have a book here somewhere, right? In the end, what is the vision of the Messianic era in this song? It's when God kills the angel of death. In other words, it is about the death of death, right? When death ends, that is redemption. So that's the point of this song, and we can sing it together. Did I bring? I did not bring a transliteration, so we'll sing it in English. One little goat, and Abba bought for two Zuzim, Haggadah. Then came a cat and ate the goat that Abba bought for two Zuzim, Haggadah. Then came a dog that bit the cat that ate the goat that Abba bought for two Zuzim, Haggadah. Then came a stick and beat the dog that bit the cat that ate the goat that Abba bought for two Zuzim, Haggadah. Then came the fire and burned the stick that beat the dog that bit the cat that ate the goat that Abba bought for two Zuzim, Haggadah. We'll skip the end. Then came the holy blessed one and slew the angel of death, who killed the butcher, who slaughtered the ox, who drank the water, who quenched the fire, who burnt the stick, who beat the dog that bit the cat that ate the goat that Abba bought for two Zuzim, Haggadah, Haggadah. All right, we can do this as a sort of a litany. I think I took it from a contemporary Christian translation of the Bible. So everybody responds, God's love never quits. Thank God who deserves your thanks.
God's
love never quits.
The God who struck down the Egyptian firstborn.
God's
love never quits.
And rescued Israel from Egypt's oppression.
God's
love never quits.
With a mighty hand and an outstretched arm.
God's love never
quits.
The God who split the Red Sea in half.
God's love never
quits.
And led Israel right through the middle.
God's love
never quits.
Dumping Pharaoh and his army in the sea.
God's love
never quits.
The God who guided the people in the desert.
God's love never quits.
Odu Ladonai Kito. Ki
Leolam Chasto.
All right, so then it's traditional at the end of the Seder to pretend as if we have gone all night in studying. And so we actually do a passage from the morning service, which is why we pick up here from Psalm 136. Psalm 136, which is sometimes called Hallel Hagadol, the great Hallel, is part of our festival morning service. And then we just continue from that point through part of the festival morning service, as if to say, like, we are like those rabbis who stuck around even to the morning Shema, right? And so this is a section from our morning service where our mouth is full of song as the sea, and our tongue is full of joyous song as its multitude of waves, and our lips as full as praise as the breadth of the heavens, and our eyes as sparkling as the sun and moon, and our hands as outspread as the eagles of the sky, and our feet as swift as deers. We still could not thank you sufficiently, Lord our God and God of our ancestors, and to bless your name for 1,000th of the thousand of thousands of thousands, and myriads of goodnesses that you performed for our ancestors and for us. From Egypt, Lord our God, did you redeem us, and from the house of slaves you restored us. May your name be praised forever, our King, the power, the great and holy King in the heavens and in the earth, since for you it is pleasant, O Lord our God and God of our ancestors, song and lauding, praise and hymn, boldness and dominion, triumph, greatness and strength, psalm and splendor, holiness and kingship, blessings and thanksgivings from now and forever. Blessed are you, Lord, power, King, exalted through laudings, power of thanksgivings, master of wonders, who chooses the songs of him, King, power, and of the life of the worlds. And then we do a fourth cup, which sanctifies the Hallel, the praise that we just offered. I am ready to fulfill the commandment of drinking the fourth of the four cups. This recalls God's promise of redemption to the people Israel, as it says, I will take you for me as a people, and I will be for you as a God. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen.
Amen.
Now, if you were paying attention, you'll notice that we stopped eating and we did the grace after meals, but then we had 2 cups of wine, which are the last things that we eat at the Seder. You're not supposed to eat anything after the Afikomen, but you're allowed to drink 2 cups of wine. But then it's traditional to bless after you've eaten something significant, including wine. So this little paragraph here at the bottom is the blessing over the fact that we kept drinking wine. Blessed are you, Adonai, for the vine and its fruit, for the beautiful and spacious land you gave us. Have mercy on us and bring us there to eat its fruits. Grant us happiness on this festival of Matzot. Well, not this festival, but festival that will come, that will be the festival of Matzot. Blessed are you, Adonai, for the land and for the fruit of the vine. Kadesh Orchatz, Karpas Yachatz, Mageed Ramta Motzi Matzah, Maror Korech Shulchan Orech, Tafun Barech, Hallel Nirtzah. All right, we'll read together. Our Seder now has ended with its history-laden rites. We have journeyed from Egypt on the storied night of nights. We bore witness, we remembered our covenant with you. So we pray that you redeem us, as pledged your word to do. Shana Haba'ah Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. All right. Any final thoughts or reflections?
To me, the Hashanah Haba'ah many years was a hope. I'm older than probably anybody else at this gathering. I well remember before the state of Israel, and definitely was a hope. I was at the last Seder with my cousin before she made Aliyah. She and her children and her grandchildren and her great-grandchildren are now living in the land of Israel. So that was never something, it was real. It was next year we all hope to celebrate our next Pesach in Jerusalem, in the land of Israel.
All right, I wanted to ask whether anybody has changed their mind or has a thought about who is the hero of the Seder?
Now it sounds like God. God is the hero.
Nice, Sam. Yeah.
I was going to agree with you, Miriam, from before. That is the teller.
The teller. All of us,
Yeah.
the people who tell the
All of us.
story.
All of us.
Yeah, but there's so much praise. So it
Yes.
has to be the hero. You praise the hero.
Nice, nice.
I don't remember the original list, but I kind of wondered if it isn't the children who ask the questions.
I think the questioning, right? The idea of questioning that continues throughout the whole Seder is incredibly important. And the fact that it's supposed to be like intergenerational for children and their accompanying adults. And it's not just for children, of course, right? But like, even if we were all learned, even if we were all rabbis, wise, we should all continue to tell the story of the Exodus from Egypt. We have to cultivate child's mind with respect to understanding our own freedom. Any takeaways that people have?
I'm very grateful to you, Rafi, for leading us in this and making it honest and not trying to pretend that we're doing a Seder, but giving us good instruction and being open to conversation through the whole thing. And I think it's a pretty special occasion. So thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
And I appreciate the conversation all around the screen. Rafi, you're of course the rabbi, and it's wonderful to learn from you always. But it's been wonderful to learn from people who are part of your congregation about Akukim. So really enriched my experience in learning. Thank you all.
Well, I want to thank Kathy especially for helping me to think through each part of this and for helping to be the inspiration and connection for it. And to the Schenectady Clergy Against Hate for being like, yeah, this seems like a good idea. Let's do it.
Yeah,
and
thank you for all the work you did, Rafi.
Oh, it was a labor of love. It was a lot of work, but I enjoyed it. I am happy to send the PowerPoint slides to anybody who wants them. So send me an email if you want them, and I'm happy to send them to you. It's a pretty good version of the Seder, and there's definitely pieces you can skip over and pieces that we skipped over tonight that you could focus on at a different time. And this question of the historical development was a really interesting sort of way for me to think about going into the Seder. So I appreciate that. I'm going to close us out and invite folks of my congregation to go to the Minyan link for our evening Mariv service, so that we can do Mariv together.
Good night. Thank you, folks. I got now because you really spoke beautifully, and I got to hear some very nice things. Appreciate.
And may I take this opportunity to wish our Christian friends a happy Easter.
Yes.
We spoke to our Muslim friends about Ramadan, and of course, we're in the middle of our Passover, gearing up for the actual Passover. But thank you. I think this was very informative, even for me as a Jew. I learned so much.
Oh, yes.
Thank you.
Thank
Very
you.
much.